now at gov.uk/transition and check, change, go for the UK's new start.
Formula One is back.
F1 is back on Sky Sports.
It's lights out, and away we go.
And there's never been a season like this before.
How was that fast?
No one knows where this road leads, but it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Down the inside, no, he can't stop into each other.
Are you ready?
Brilliant madness.
An absolutely perfect race.
Watch every race live. Upgrade to Sky Sports F1 today. Go to sky.com/F1 for details.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, July 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Florida overtakes New York as the country's top coronavirus hotspot.
Disney opens theme parks in the state despite a surge in cases.
White House officials double down on the push to reopen schools.
And China targets U.S. senators with fresh sanctions.
New York City reaches a positive milestone in the fight against COVID-19, plus more than a dozen sailors were injured after a fire on board a U.S. Navy ship. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stanshauer in sports. Great finishes in golf and NASCAR, and the NFL team in Washington will no longer be called the Redskins.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting witham.com.
And U.S. futures gaining to start the week, 6:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 12 points. Dow futures up 136. NASDAQ futures up 55. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds, yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.5% or 61 cents at $39.94 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or $11.20 at $18.13.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1321 against the dollar. The yen 107.09. And PepsiCo reporting a second quarter profit that beat analyst estimates. And this data check brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com. Nathan.
Karen, we begin in Florida with the state hitting a record for coronavirus infections, reporting more than 15,000 daily cases, the highest level ever for any state, including New York. At the same time, the push to reopen schools is gathering steam. Alberto Carvalho is superintendent of Miami-Dade County Schools.
It is quite possible, if the social behavior and the restrictions in place, if people wear masks, if people exercise social distancing, that conditions may be appropriate and healthy for students to return to the very best model of teaching and learning, which is in person.
Carvalho spoke on Meet the Press, heard right here on Bloomberg Radio. He says Miami-Dade will likely open sports training camps at schools later this month.
And Florida's not alone. The push to reopen classrooms is coming on strong from the White House.
There's nothing in the data that suggests that kids being in school is in any way dangerous.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos took to Fox News Sunday, heard on Bloomberg Radio, to downplay the health risks of students returning to classrooms.
Parents are expecting that this fall their kids are going to have a full-time experience with their learning, and we need to follow through on that promise.
DeVos is also repeating threats from President Trump to cut funding for schools that don't fully resume in-person learning this fall.
Meantime, in Arizona, deaths from the virus rose for a third day while cases declined. South Carolina reported its highest positivity rate on record. 22% came back positive for COVID-19. In states like those, a few simple changes could do a lot to curb the virus. That's according to Assistant Secretary of Health, Admiral Brett Giroir.
Closing bars is an important thing. Limiting the capacity of restaurants is an important thing.
President Trump's former head of coronavirus testing spoke on ABC's This Week, also heard on Bloomberg Radio. He says the administration's monitoring the outbreak and thinks it can be contained.
We are all very concerned about the rise in cases, no doubt about that, and that's why we're meeting regularly. We're surging in assistance, but we are in a much better place.
That place right now has daily U.S. infections rising by nearly 60,000 a day.
On average, California accounts for nearly 10,000 of those daily cases, and now there's word the virus is spreading at one of the state's favorite summer vacation spots. And here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
South Lake Tahoe, with the influx of people wanting to get into boats, wanting to party and drink, there is concern for the next weeks, and already a reported increase in per capita infection rate exceeding the state's goals. El Dorado County's health director, Dr. Nancy Williams, says if South Lake Tahoe, if it were the region were its own county, it would now be added to the state's monitoring list and asked to curtail certain activities. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thanks. Back in Florida, Disney opened its Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom parks on Saturday, despite surging infections in Florida. We spoke with Disney's chairman of parks, Josh D'Amaro, who joined us from Magic Kingdom.
There's a responsibility for both our guests and in our operating environment. And as we continue to open up, we're adjusting and modifying where we need to modify. But I'd say in general, if you were to walk down Main Street today or look around a merchandise shop, you're going to see a very different experience than you ever have before.
Disney's conducting temperature checks at the gate, mandating masks and controlling capacity by requiring reservations. Still, employee unions want even more precautions. Disney's Epcot and Hollywood Studios parks are scheduled to open Wednesday.
We turn now from coronavirus news to increasing tensions between the U.S. and China. This morning, Beijing announced sanctions against U.S. officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. It's seen as retaliation for U.S. measures tied to the treatment of ethnic minorities in China. Bloomberg's Jody Schneider has more from Hong Kong.
This is very much in this back and forth we continue to see. Whenever the U.S. does something to raise the tensions, we see it on the Chinese side within a week. So clearly we are seeing the pushback right now from the Chinese government.
The move is seen as largely symbolic. China's foreign ministry says sanctions take effect today, but declined to elaborate on specific measures.
On the corporate front, we have an acquisition in the chip industry. Analog Devices has agreed to buy Maxim Integrated Products for around $17 billion. The deal values the combined company at around $68 billion.
A prominent bank is preparing for job cuts. According to Swiss media, Credit Suisse is considering a savings plan that could cut hundreds of positions. The bank is reportedly mulling reductions to domestic branches as the pandemic boosts online operations.
Oil is falling as OPEC prepares its next move. Historic output cuts helped prices double in the past few months. Now the group considers how to unwind those measures. OPEC and its allies hold an online summit Wednesday. We're seeing crude decline ahead of that meeting. Right now, NYMEX crude is lower by 1.75% or 71 cents at $39.84 a barrel. Brent is down 1.4% at $42.63.
S&P futures are higher, up 11 points this morning, and Dow futures are up 118. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. 6:07 on Wall Street. Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York City, once the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak, reported its first day with 0 confirmed or probable virus deaths since the pandemic hit New York State. The milestone came in initial data from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. It marked the end of a 4-month stretch since the city reported its first COVID-19 fatality on March 11th. The confirmed daily death count hit its highest on April 7th at 597. Meanwhile, daycare can resume today. Among several restrictions, no more than 15 children will be allowed in a classroom in New York City. More than a dozen sailors were hospitalized after a fire broke out on the USS Bonhomme Richard in Naval Base San Diego. Rear Admiral Philip Sobek.
Sailors across this waterfront are absolutely doing a magnificent job to save the USS Bonhomme Richard. They're fighting their ship, and they're saving their ship.
What started the fire isn't clear. The ship was undergoing maintenance or construction. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has taken a 5-point lead over President Trump among voters in Texas following a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths there. According to a poll by a Dallas Morning News University of Texas at Tyler survey, Biden has 46% compared to 41% for Trump. Senator Lindsey Graham is preparing to invite former special counsel Robert Mueller to testify before a Senate panel about the probe of Russian interference in the 2016 election. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continued to slam President Trump's decision to commute the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor Roger Stone as an act of staggering corruption. Pelosi spoke on CNN's State of the Union.
People should know this isn't just about lying to Congress. That means lying to the American people, witness tampering and the rest. And it's about our national security.
The White House earlier said Stone is a victim of the Russia hoax that the left and its allies in the media perpetuated for years. Actress Kelly Preston has died. Her husband, John Travolta, announced Preston lost her 2-year battle with breast cancer. Kelly Preston was 57. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's just before 6:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashauer.
All right, Nathan, the name change becomes official today, or at least the football team in Washington we know will no longer be called the Redskins. That news had been coming since corporate sponsors began to demand that owner Dan Snyder give in to the calls for the change. Still unknown, though, is what the new name will be. Lakers have lost a key player, nothing to do with COVID. Rajon Rondo broke his thumb at practice last night, likely to miss most, if not all, of the upcoming NBA playoffs. Exciting finishes in golf and NASCAR, Muirfield, Ohio. Justin Thomas led Colin Morikawa by 3 shots with 3 holes to play, but they went to a playoff and Thomas rolled in a 50-foot putt, but Morikawa made a 25-footer of his own, and then Thomas missed a 9-foot putt that would have won it on the second extra hole. Morikawa won on the third. It's his second career title. In NASCAR in Kentucky, 22-year-old Cole Custer passed 3 drivers on the final lap and got his first title. Yankee closer Aroldis Chapman tested positive for COVID. He's got mild symptoms, not known how long he'll be out. But manager Aaron Boone says he's got a replacement in Zach Britton.
Look, obviously Britton's been an elite closer in this game for a long time and still a great pitcher, so he naturally could fill that role. It's easy to put him in that, but again, with our team and with our bullpen and our pitchers, we feel confident in a lot of guys. But Britt would be a natural guy if Chappie wasn't back at that point.
Gary Cole again looked sharp in an intra-squad game. Aaron Judge didn't play. He's got a stiff neck. Clint Frazier among the MLB players who will wear a mask during games. Frazier says it's a good example to set. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, a Swiss sports shoe company backed by tennis star Roger Federer is preparing for an IPO as soon as next year. That's according to Swiss media, which say the company called On could be worth more than $2 billion. On's running shoes are available in more than 6,500 shops around the world. S&P futures higher by 14 points. Dow futures up 143. NASDAQ futures gaining 61 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of global equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients. It can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the... Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
Just one cornetto.
Aiden, love, your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone, I mean.
Aiden, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
That's Linda Amin.
It does feel like Singapore is a country on the cusp of change. Let's get insights, perspective from Sylvia Lim. She is the chairman of the Workers' Party. Sylvia, what's your assessment of the party's performance and the overall performance of the opposition?
This was certainly a better performance for opposition parties compared to the previous election in 2015. And for the Workers' Party in particular, we're very pleased with the vote of confidence from the voters, which enabled us to win 10 seats, making a breakthrough in a new group representation constituency called Sengkang GRC. I think overall this election was quite a different one from previous ones being held in a pandemic. The modes of campaigning were different. And I think one of perhaps the questions on voters' minds was the timing of the election. We do know from various polls before that there was a sense that the majority of Singaporeans felt that the government should focus on controlling and handling the pandemic rather than to have an election at this time, because its term was still able to run until April next year. So there were various factors at play, I believe.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. PepsiCo reporting stronger than expected sales in the second quarter as consumers kept stocking up on snack foods and beverages during the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, we're watching shares of analog devices up 0.8% in early trading. It boosted its third quarter revenue forecast, and as we've been reporting, it entered into to a definitive agreement to buy Maxim Integrated Products in an all-stock transaction that values the combined enterprise at over $68 billion. S&P futures are higher at 14 points this morning. Dow futures up 147. NASDAQ futures up 64. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. The 10-year Treasury up 2/32, yield 0.63%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.6% or 66 cents at $39.89 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $11.20 at $18.1320 an ounce. The euro 1.1328 against the dollar. British pound 1.2609, and the yen's at 107.10. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, there was a devastating wave of new COVID-19 cases over the weekend, including Florida, with a record 15,000 cases in a single day on Sunday. Doctors are now warning that ICU units across the country are near or at capacity. Firefighters at Naval Base San Diego are still working today to put out all of the fire on board a Navy amphibious assault ship that caught fire on Sunday. 21 people were injured. Washington won't be the Redskins after today, according to multiple reports. After mounting public pressure, including from its biggest sponsors, the NFL team will drop the name. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak as we get ready for the kickoff of second quarter earnings season. The big banks will be first to report. And ahead of that, we welcome Allison Williams, Senior Financial Services Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Nice to have you with us, Allison, though not many analysts, I think, are expecting things to be too pretty in the financial sector. Certainly hasn't been since the end of the first quarter.
Yes, it will be a very tough quarter, and I think, really the biggest hit is going to come from loan loss provisions, and that's really sort of accounting for the losses to come. If we look at the current quarter, there are a couple of tailwinds coming into the quarter that did stay strong, actually, and that relates to trading revenue as well as underwriting revenue. By contrast, M&A will be a low light, but we do expect strong growth in those areas, which should help to fund some of the loss provisions. The other thing we're going to be looking at is loan growth. And coming into the quarter, we had very strong increases in commercial and industrial lending, and that was really because of the drawdowns that were happening sort of beginning in March. March and April, we did see like a big jump in those loans being drawn down, and subsequently a lot of that has been paid down. So that's, at the end of the day, good for credit quality going forward, right? Because if a lot of companies are pulling down credit lines because they are in dire need and might not be able to pay those back, that's obviously not a good thing. But subsequently, those companies really tapping the buoyant capital markets and paying down those loans. But for the quarter, the average balances of C&I should be somewhat helpful to interest income. Coming out of the quarter, that's obviously going to be less helpful. And with the capital markets and debt underwriting, we are moving into the seasonally slower quarter as we exit 2Q.
All right. Well, let's start with the loan loss provisions, because obviously that was a huge issue at the end of the first quarter. Do you think that those are going to be as dire as they were then in the second quarter?
So I do think that the second quarter loss provisions will be at least in line with what we saw in the first quarter and could actually be higher. So two things. First of all, the economic situation has worsened since that point in time. And so keep in mind we've had an accounting change in the U.S., and banks need to sort of look ahead and estimate what they think the future losses are going to be over the lives of those loans. Even when we had reported earnings in April, banks said that things had already worsened since that sort of March 31st cutoff. So the fact that things have gotten worse in terms of the outlook since then will require the banks to put up reserves. Things are changing very rapidly, but they will have to make a cut at June 30th, and so the expectation is that we're going to be looking at a scenario that's sort of at least as bad as the first quarter. The question is, can things get better from here, right? So because these reserves are more front-loading, there is the potential that if we do experience sort of the more bullish side of things and have some sort of a V-shaped recovery, could that mean that we're reserved enough even as the losses come through? On the flip side, in a W or U or any other shape of scenario that are being sort of bandied about, could there be more need for reserves?
Only got about 30 seconds left here. Do you think that the losses from the loan loss provisions could be outweighed by the tailwind of underwriting?
So it won't be outweighed, but it'll help to be an offset. So in aggregate, it sort of could be close, but it's going to be much more positive for someone like Goldman and Morgan Stanley that have more exposure to trading and less exposure to lending, and then less so for someone like J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Citi. Wells is obviously in the weakest spot.
Yeah, and J.P. Morgan and Citi, of course, kick things off along with Wells Fargo tomorrow. Thanks for this. Allison Williams, Senior Financial Services Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, providing unique real-time research and context on industries, all the market and government facts that impact business. Terminal customers can access all the research from Bloomberg Intelligence at BIGO. S&P futures on this Monday morning higher by 13 points. Dow futures up 140. NASDAQ futures higher by 62 points. 10 years up 230 seconds. The yield on a 10-year note 0.63%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. A program from Ford is promising you can return your new car within the first year if you lose your job. You'd have to have a Ford credit, loan, or lease. The program applies to new and used models from the 2019 to 2021 model years. The company cites Cox Automotive data that says about a third of car shoppers are delaying a purchase because of economic and unemployment fears. A slow rebound is taking place in the corporate travel industry. With that has come a move away from cheaper online bookings to the expertise of travel agents. Reuters says they're launching tools to provide information about local mask and social distancing requirements, as well as the details of hotel, airline, and car transportation hygiene. Investors today are impatient for the start of earnings season. More to hear about what the big banks are saying about this quarter than to see last quarter's results. S&P futures up 10, NASDAQ futures 46, Dow futures 110 points. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda. The power of dreams.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining to start the week, and as Florida hits a record for coronavirus infections, it's reporting more than 15,000 daily cases, the highest level ever for any state. At the same time, the push to reopen Florida classes is gathering steam. Miami-Dade Superintendent Alberto Carvalho plans to open sports training camps at schools later this month.
We're going to obviously do our very best in our community, considering where the health data currently is.
And speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Carvalho said science, not politics, needs to drive decisions on schools.
The push to reopen classrooms is also coming on strong from the White House. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos took to Fox News Sunday to downplay the health risks of students returning to class.
There's nothing in the data that suggests that kids being in school is in any way dangerous.
DeVos is also repeating threats from President Trump to cut funding for schools that don't fully resume in-person learning this fall.
Meantime, in Arizona, deaths from the coronavirus rose for a third day. Cases declined. Increasing fatalities will likely continue in the coming weeks, according to Assistant Health Secretary Admiral Brent Giroir.
We do expect deaths to go up. If you have more cases, more hospitalizations, we do expect to see that over the next 2 or 3 weeks before this turns around.
And Giroir tells ABC's This Week the White House is monitoring the outbreak and thinks it can be contained. Meet the Press, Fox News Sunday, and This Week can all be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio.
We turn now from coronavirus news to increasing tensions between the U.S. and China. This morning, Beijing announced sanctions against U.S. officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. The move is seen as largely symbolic and as retaliation for U.S. measures tied to the treatment of ethnic minorities in China.
On the corporate front, we have an acquisition in the chip industry. Analog Devices agreeing to buy Maxim Integrated Products for nearly $21 billion in stock. The deal represents a 22% premium to Maxim's closing price on Friday.
And PepsiCo is out with earnings that beat estimates. Snack sales helped boost revenue to $16 billion in the second quarter, though organic sales fell 0.3%. Pepsi is still declining to give an outlook for the full year.
Futures this morning on the rise. S&P futures are up about 15 points. Dow futures up 145 and NASDAQ futures up 65. The 10-year Treasury is up 1/32, the yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.7%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Thanks, Karen. 6:33 on Wall Street. Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. It was once the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak. Over the weekend, New York City reported its first day with 0 confirmed or probable virus deaths since the pandemic hit the state. The milestone came in initial data from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. It marked the end of a 4-month stretch since the city reported its first COVID-19 fatality on March 11th. Meanwhile, children can return to daycare today in New York. Among several restrictions, no more than 15 children will be allowed in a classroom. 21 people have suffered minor injuries in an explosion and fire on board a ship at Naval Base San Diego. The cause of the fire on the USS Bonhomme Richard is under investigation. Rear Admiral Philip Sobek.
An 1,800-foot perimeter has been established around the USS Bonhomme Richard and the surrounding buildings on the base and been evacuated to ensure safety of personnel.
Officials said about 160 sailors and officers were on board, far fewer than the 1,000 typically on the ship when it's on active duty. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has taken a 5-point lead over President Trump among voters in Texas following a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths there, according to new polling. A Dallas Morning News University of Texas at Tyler poll has Biden attracting 46% of registered voters compared to 41% for Trump. Poland's President Andrzej Duda is poised to win a highly charged election after a bitter battle that pitted the conservative incumbent against a pro-European challenger. Criticism continues from both sides of the aisle after President Trump commuted the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor Roger Stone. Stone was set to begin his 40-month prison term for lying to Congress about the Trump campaign's ties to WikiLeaks. Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff.
It is a shockingly corrupt abuse of the president to commute the sentence of someone who not only lied to Congress, not only obstructed the investigation, not only intimidated witnesses, but did so to cover up for the president. And Stone made no secret of the fact that he wanted this relief and that he was withholding information to protect the president.
The White House earlier said Stone is a victim of the Russia hoax that the left and its allies in the media perpetuated for years. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's almost 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report with John Stashauer.
Nathan, as of today, they are no longer the Washington Redskins after a long, drawn-out battle where team owner Dan Snyder had steadfastly refused to even consider a name change despite calls for years to do it. When a corporate push came, Snyder finally relented. The question now is what the team will now be called. There are reportedly trademark issues to be worked out. Rajon Rondo broke his thumb at Lakers practice last night. He'll miss most, if not all, of the upcoming NBA playoffs. The Lakers' backcourt was already without Avery Bradley, who opted out of the restart. The two stars on the Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, are two of the few who have decided not to have social justice messages on their uniform. NHL training camps officially open today. Commissioner Gary Bettman says he never doubted his sport would return.
Certainly by March 12th, and I believe based on the way we were all interacting and we were problem solving and we were discussing things and modeling things, I believe that we would get to this point because it was the right thing to do for the game and everybody involved with the game.
24 teams will head to the two hub cities July 26th. The Rangers and Islanders go to Toronto, and then the games start August 1st. And while there'll be a lot of hockey in Toronto, the Blue Jays are not sure they'll be able to play there. Canadian health officials have not yet signed off on it, so the Blue Jays are considering playing their games in Buffalo. MLS games have resumed, but two teams, Dallas and Nashville, are out due to numerous positive tests, and yesterday's game between Toronto and Washington had to be postponed. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
Thank you, John. At 6:37 on Wall Street, and coming up this week, U.S. banks take center stage with second quarter earnings reports. It kicks off tomorrow with results from J.P. Morgan in the 6 a.m. hour, and here with the preview is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Banks are about to reveal what 3 months of COVID-19 has done to the industry. Second quarter results will probably show that the trends that took hold at the start of the year only intensified. That includes slumping consumer spending and surging provisions for loan losses. Fred Cannon is an analyst at KBW.
The new accounting standard that was implemented in the first quarter allows the banks to essentially pull forward their expected losses. So even though losses have not occurred yet, the banks are starting to prepare for that.
Among the names reporting this week, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, BNY Mellon, and Citigroup. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And Charlie, it's also going to be a busy week on the economic front. We're awaiting data on U.S. spending, housing, and jobs. Here with more on that is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Consumers are staging a cautious comeback as the coronavirus lingers and in some cases flares up. Economists say June retail sales probably added girth to May's historic gain of almost 18%, accompanied by gains in housing starts and industrial production. Jobless claims, though, remain elevated, with economists forecasting another grim tally topping 1 million. Also this week, the Consumer Price Index, the Fed's Regional Beige Book Survey, and the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Vinny. It is 6:39 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Traffic cameras solve lots of problems. I'm Justin Fox, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. In the 1990s, a lot of countries in Europe and elsewhere began installing big networks of cameras to catch speeders and red light runners. Some places in the U.S. did too, but they never caught on in a big way. In recent years, there's even been a backlash, with 13 states now banning speed cameras. Not coincidentally, U.S. traffic fatality rates, once about the same as Australia's and Germany's, are now much higher than in those camera-using countries. Empirical studies, and there are dozens, show a remarkably strong link between use of speed cameras in particular and reduced accidents. There's another reason to favor speed cameras that's especially relevant now. They leave less discretion to the police and highway patrol on whom to pull over, a discretion that has often been used to target black motorists. I'm Justin Fox. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. Another group of struggling American newspapers has been sold to an investment firm. Chatham Asset Management won the auction for bankrupt publisher McClatchy. No word on the sale price. Chatham and fellow McClatchy debt holder Brigham Capital Management previously said they'd submit a bid worth more than $300 million. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of global equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients. It can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice. and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can. If you plan to use public transport, you must wear a face covering at all times, avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Can you leave it round the back, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Times Radio.
An exciting new national speech station is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corran.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here.
Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The number of coronavirus cases continue to soar in Florida and Texas. Both states are leaning on the federal government for assistance.
More than 15,000 new coronavirus cases being reported in Florida. That's the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, in Texas, health experts say hospitals in some of the biggest metro areas could reach capacity by the end of this month. Austin Mayor Steve Adler.
Austin, again, is a cautionary tale. Cities cannot open in any way that looks like what they used to do before the pandemic.
Many businesses still open in Texas, but after recently closing bars, Governor Greg Abbott says the state may scale back its reopening even further. Clayton Neville, Dallas.
All U.S. Marine Corps personnel on the Japanese island of Okinawa have had their movements restricted in an effort to combat the spread of COVID-19. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We continue to watch shares of analog devices up 0.9% in early trading after boosting its third quarter revenue forecast and entering into a definitive agreement to buy Maxim Integrated Products. PepsiCo reported stronger than expected sales in the second quarter. Futures this morning are higher with S&P futures up 11 points, Dow futures up 113, NASDAQ futures up 55. The DAX in Germany's up 0.8%. 10-year Treasury up 230 seconds, yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 2.2% on 88 cents at $39.67 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $11.50 at $18.1330 an ounce. The euro 1.1324 against the dollar. British pound 1.2597 and the yen 107.09. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the Florida Department of Health has reported more than 15,000 new coronavirus cases. That's the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the pandemic began. Actress Kelly Preston has died. Her husband, John Travolta, announced the 57-year-old actress lost her 2-year battle with breast cancer. Washington's NFL team will get rid of the name Redskins today, according to multiple reports. Owner Dan Snyder and the organization will announce the move 2 weeks before the start of training camp. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios where it is 6:48 on Wall Street. Time to check what else is going on in D.C. as if a name change for their football team weren't enough. The coronavirus surge continues to dominate official Washington's attention after Florida recorded a record 15,300 new cases in that state alone yesterday. Assistant Health Secretary Admiral Brett Giroir tells ABC's This Week the U.S. is in a better place than at the last peak of the pandemic 3 months ago.
The testing could allow us to identify a hotspot. We have surge teams, CDC teams, response teams all going to places. We're in much better place for our PPE.
The country is not in a good place with respect to COVID right now.
Dr. Tom Inglesby is with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Across the South and in California and in a variety of other states, we're having sharp increases in cases, sharp increases in hospitalizations and ventilator use, and now increases in deaths.
Inglesby was on Fox News Sunday. Despite that, the Trump administration is pushing hard to reopen schools this fall. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was on the same program.
Children get the virus at a far lower rate than any other part of the population. And again, there is nothing in the data that would suggest that kids being back in school is dangerous to them.
But Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego tells CBS's Face the Nation a full reopening is too risky right now.
We can't open until at least October with the levels of the virus so pronounced in our community.
President Trump's decision to commute Roger Stone's sentence is also making waves. House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff tells ABC's This Week anyone who cares about the rule of law should be nauseated.
He lied to cover up and protect the president, and the president through this commutation is basically saying, if you lie for me, if you cover up for me, if you have my back, then I will make sure that you get a get-out-of-jail-free card.
And that is some of the conversation from the political shows heard every Sunday right here on Bloomberg Radio. For more on this Monday morning, we're joined by Bloomberg News politics editor Kathleen Hunter. And, Kate, let's start with the coronavirus response. Obviously, we're seeing this continued surge to the south. At the same time, the Trump administration is really continuing to push hard at reopening schools.
Yeah, and this is, I think, really a continuation of the tension that we've been seeing dating back to February or March even, where the Trump administration is pushing more, I would say, on the economic end, being concerned about the implications of, things continuing to be closed, things like schools right now, where the emphasis is, having an impact, a follow-on impact on the economy, and, trying to balance that against some of the public health concerns that are out there. And so I think that that's the dynamic that continues to be in play, and now really the focus is looking at schools.
And interestingly, there are growing reports now that the White House is beginning to sideline, or perhaps is continuing to sideline, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and even compiling what could be seen as opposition research if Fauci were a political candidate.
Well, he's an interesting figure because Dr. Fauci has remained consistently quite popular, and there's been several studies done or surveys done that have indicated that the public writ large across the board, trusts him more than they trust Trump in terms of handling of the coronavirus. So I think perhaps in a lot of ways there's certainly speculation out there that that's what's protected his job thus far, given that we've had some indications from Trump via, public statements and tweets that have, sort of undercut some of Fauci's authority in various ways. And so I think that, it's been kind of this simmering issue, but the message essentially coming out of the White House now has been that, Fauci is a doctor. He has a public health perspective, and the implication of that being, that perhaps he doesn't have a broader perspective that also includes a sensitivity to economic implications. I think the term has been used that he has kind of a narrower perspective that's focused just on public health, and that's kind of been the criticism, which, I think it's worth noting that's an interesting criticism to have in the middle of a pandemic, but that's certainly been the Trump administration's, the White House's focus in terms of characterizing him.
All right, let's turn to the commutation of Roger Stone's sentence. Obviously, that's continuing to get a lot of attention here, including from former special counsel Robert Mueller, who doesn't typically make much, if any, public comment on just about anything since his testimony following the release of his report. But he did put out an op-ed in the Washington Post over the weekend.
He did, and I think that, now we're seeing Senator Lindsey Graham, the Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and a close ally of Trump's, essentially indicating that he might seek to have Mueller come and testify before his panel. That would, potentially would certainly bring the issue of the Russia investigation back into the public consciousness more than it has been in recent weeks. But I think the stipulation there is that it would do it in the context now of Roger Stone's sentence having been commuted, which Trump and his allies are sort of hailing as evidence that, of some kind of course correction or, indication that the conviction of Stone was somehow misguided. And so I think that it gives the Republicans in Congress potentially an opportunity to kind of reframe the Russia debate ahead of the November elections. Obviously, Democrats would take a different tack, and that has the potential of backfiring, but I think that's the thinking there.
Also, interestingly, this morning, Axios says it spoke with Stone, did an interview with him, and he's now saying that now that he's a free man, he plans to campaign for President Trump heading toward the November election. I mean, what kind of impact could that have to have the Russia investigation back potentially in front of voters' minds?
Well, I think it's an indication that the calculus on the part of the Trump campaign or Trump and his allies is that, the Russia investigation is as much of an energizer for their own base as it is for the Democratic base, and perhaps not an issue that's going to really change the minds of independent voters. And so I think in some ways, given that, and also given that we know that Roger Stone is someone whose political background dates back to the Nixon administration, he has a lot of experience in campaigning for Republican candidates and helping to, be the architect of some campaign strategies that have been useful for Republicans in the past, and specifically for Trump. I think in that regard, it's not surprising that we would expect to see him enlisted again in 2020.
Bloomberg Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter. Thank you. As always, read more on these stories at Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg Terminal, and follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington. Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:56 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology. Ranked in the top 2% nationally for alumni mid-career earnings and number 1 for student upward economic mobility. Learn more at njit.edu. Now here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Mars is about to be invaded by planet Earth big time. 3 countries, the United States, China, and the United Arab Emirates, are sending sending unmanned spacecraft to the Red Planet in quick succession, beginning this week. Each spacecraft will travel more than 300 million miles before reaching Mars next February. It takes 6 to 7 months at the minimum for a spacecraft to loop out beyond Earth's orbit and sync up with Mars' more distant orbit around the sun. Scientists want to know what Mars was like billions of years ago when it had rivers, lakes, and oceans that may have allowed simple, tiny organisms to flourish before the planet morphed into the barren, wintry desert world it is today. Acts of kindness may not be that random after all. Science says being kind pays off. Research shows acts of kindness make us feel better and healthier. Scientists say it's also key to how we evolved and survived as a species. University of Oxford anthropologist Oliver Curry found at least 27 studies showing the same thing. Being kind makes people feel better emotionally. And finally, Google says it plans to spend $10 billion over the next 5 to 7 years to help accelerate the adoption of digital technologies in India. Sundar Pichai, who was born in the country and is now chief executive of parent Alphabet, says the outbreak of the coronavirus has made clear the importance of technology for conducting business and for connecting with friends and family. And that's today's Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. And Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way.
Hi, Knock. How you doing? You all right?
It's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
The fact is we are likely facing a slower growth, a sluggish economy as we do recover out of this, and that is a great backdrop for secular growth.
A lot of businesses are not buying into the V. They see a different destination regardless of the journey.
People who have got the wrong impression from the data from May and June. What really happened is the economy sort of fell off a cliff, hit a trampoline and bounced.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Equity Futures Positive. We're back in the studio and live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Jonathan Farrow. Tom Keene, earnings season beginning in the United States of America and European fiscal policy coming into sharper focus at the back end of the week.
John, I'm going to go to earnings. They're both very important. It's a busy week ahead. I can't say enough for the importance of Pepsi-Cola's earnings this morning, that they beat organic revenue growth. Gina Martin-Adams of Bloomberg Intelligence, John, has been absolutely dead on the earnings surprises we're going to see off the gloom. PepsiCo was like a negative 3% organic revenue growth, and they came in almost flat. Futures moved up a little bit off that. Futures now, John, up 18 because we are live at 731 Lexington.
Yeah, futures positive on the S&P, Tom, up by 0.6%. Catching up with the PepsiCo CFO a little bit later this morning. Lisa, two pillars of support for the broader market. One is fiscal, the other is monetary policy. This Thursday, the ECB will be meeting. This coming weekend, European leaders get it together, and that is a huge focal point of this market.
Yeah, although the fiscal five, you're getting the sort of frugal
5 is coming out and trying to push back a little bit against the 750 billion euro program. So we'll see what gets passed. The Fed very much in focus. This week we get a slew of Fed speak ahead of the blackout period, which begins next week, and that begins today at 11:30 a.m. New York Fed President John Williams and Bank of England's Andrew Bailey joining together to talk about LIBOR, which, remember, is supposed to be unfazed next year. Francine Lacroix will be hosting that. Then at 1 p.m., Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan talking about COVID testing as well as the economic recovery. At 2 p.m., and I find this really interesting, we're going to get the U.S. monthly budget statement for June, which should show an unprecedented deficit for the U.S. budget. John, no one cares. This is not being reflected in borrowing costs, and this is not being reflected in what people are proposing in Washington.
Well, the sovereign debt market certainly doesn't care right now. That's one takeaway. In your equity market, as we say, we advanced 0.6% on this Monday morning. A series of revisions for big tech that we'll get our teeth into a little bit later. For the broader market, there's been a massive conversation about tilting away from the United States and tilting towards Europe. We can start that conversation this morning with Mike Powell, BlackRock Global Chief Investment Strategist. Mike, fantastic to catch up with you, sir. Why the revision lower to U.S. equities and the tilt, the more constructive view towards Europe?
Sure. So, I think first thing is to say it isn't an especially negative view on the U.S. I mean, the U.S. both year-to-date as well as on a multi-year basis has had a tremendous run of outperformance. We just think over the next 6 to 12 months, there are a set of risks coming into focus that means the U.S. is going to perform a little more in line with the rest of global equities rather than continuing that streak of outperformance, whether it's the...
I'm placing a new order to buy Japanese yen at 107.061. So order placed to buy Japanese yen at 107.061.
I mean, we're celebrating back here with our simulcast in the office here at 731 Lexington. Again, thanks to all of our team for helping. Mike Pyle, we're also celebrating mergers and acquisitions, the combinations of Berkshire Hathaway, the combinations of Analog's devices. Can they be supportive for equity markets?
So I think on balance, we're less focused on the M&A story, which I agree with you does have some legs. But I think in particular, when we look at the U.S. market, we like two things. We like credit over equities. We see the policies that are in place, especially from the Fed looking ahead, continuing to be a really strong and resilient source of credit support. And we continue to like the up-in-quality equity market plays, tech, pharma, those up-in-quality names with strong business models and financial metrics. We think those are the types of themes that are going to continue to be rewarded in the U.S., even as we see those increased headwinds for the equity market overall.
Mike, people agree with you with respect to credit, and we see money piling into at least investment-grade U.S. corporate debt, and yet the Fed is actually paring back some of its purchases of corporate debt. Their balance sheet has actually shrunk, and we're heading into a slew of expected bankruptcies. Why go long credit now?
So I would say, we continue to see the Fed's backstops as extraordinarily credible on the credit market side. I think one of the things that's been striking is just, how little to date the Fed has had to do, to your point. But because of the credibility and the size of those backstops, which we see as ongoing, we think that the market's going to be able to continue to digest that issuance. And moreover, when we look at perhaps some of the choppiness moving ahead around the economic restart because of some of the challenges we're seeing on the public health side, we just think that backstop is going to be very resilient, even in the face of more challenging fundamental circumstances.
Mike, I wonder where that leaves your view on U.S. tech right now. More upgrades this morning. Communal upgrading its price target on Amazon to a street high 3,700. Big tech reporting over the next couple of weeks. What's the view on that now for BlackRock?
Yeah, so we're overweight quality exposures on a global basis, including in the United States. I mean, so though we're cautious on the U.S. equity market overall, the parts of the equity market that are closer to the real economy and the real economy challenges, closer to some of these risks we see on the fiscal side, up in quality exposures around tech continue to us to appear resilient, kind of regardless of the state of the world we see moving ahead. So we like that part.
Mike, this is a US-centric conversation. As the week grows older, the focus will be a whole lot more on Europe and the continent going into the weekend. Upgrading your view on that, Mike, it's a change for BlackRock. Caught up with Rick Reeder of BlackRock, your friend and colleague, I'm sure, over the last few months, and he's changed his view on Europe as well. What's behind that, Mike?
Well, I think we're seeing two big things at work. I would say one is the really strong public health response we're seeing across the continent, allowing a much stronger restart of economic activity. We think that those fundamentals matter and are going to matter and flow through to both economic data and financial markets. And secondly, we do have increased confidence in the overall policy framework there. Obviously, we're going to get some news later this week around the EU summit and how they land the $750 billion rescue package. We think that's going to largely stay as it's been proposed. But looking at national fiscal authorities, some steps forward from the ECB, both of those pieces are coming together in ways that look to us pretty constructive.
I look at this, folks, and Mike Pyle joining us from BlackRock. We welcome all of you on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television this morning. Mike, something I'm really unclear on is healthcare ballooned like the tech stocks, or is healthcare behind?
So I would say, we sort of see healthcare, particularly the pharma space in the U.S. as having, and in Europe, as having some legs behind it. Those are really sort of strong business models. I think in this moment, there's a lot of focus on what that part of the healthcare world is bringing to society, bringing to the market, and I think that's a space where we see, quite a bit of upside alongside tech.
Mike, you talked about how in Europe they've got the virus.
Long position open on Japanese yen at 107.061. So new long position open on Japanese yen against United States dollar at 107.061.
Not that, to market levels right now in the United States. I mean, is it the election? Is it something else that perhaps people aren't factoring in enough?
So I think it's kind of all of the above. So I think you point correctly to an ongoing set of challenges on the public health side. We think that's going to weigh on the restart, ultimately weigh on some of the parts of the U.S. economy and the U.S. financial markets that aren't as tech-centric or pharma-tech-centric as what we've been describing. I think we see a set of fiscal policy risks both later this month as well as between now and the end of the year, potentially posing some risks around retrenching policy support on the fiscal side too soon. And then I think when we look ahead to the election, I think there's just a good degree of uncertainty both in the lead up to the election itself, what could be a very volatile environment, as well as on the backside of that, a highly divergent set of policy platforms that the voters are going to be choosing from and the investors are going to have to confront when we look past November.
Mike, overwhelmingly the consensus view is the Democratic sweep would be negative for this market. Is that your take?
So I think it's more complicated than that. I mean, I think on one side, it is clearly right that investors are focused on a set of potential changes on corporate taxes, a significant repeal of what the Trump administration and Congress passed in 2017. That will certainly have some flow through the bottom line. But I think the flip side of that coin is, I think relative to other outcomes, it's probably a more constructive one for ongoing fiscal stimulus through the coronavirus shock, much more positive around maybe getting something done on infrastructure and R&D investment, probably more positive in terms of a greater sort of stability and predictability to U.S.-China relations, immigration policy, what have you. So I think what we're saying is, the bottom line risks that investors are focused on are real, but they're potentially a set of top-line opportunities that make this a much more balanced picture.
Mike, it's a conversation you and I will continue with the rest of the team sometime soon. Mike Powell there of BlackRock. Tom Keene, it's been amazing to watch this consensus emerge that the risk is here in the United States and the constructive view, the hope, is over in Europe. That hope's going to be put to the test a little bit later this week, Tom, when these European leaders get together. We need to see some real, firm progress through the weekend.
We have said this before and been wrong. Again, our conversations in previous hours really center on how the Netherlands will respond. John, what I would focus on now as you do a data check is futures exploding. We've gone from up 14 to up 22 now on SPX futures. That's a 3,200 level on the Standard & Poor's 500.
Tom, I know you're excited to be back, but I don't know if 0.7% higher on the S&P 500 as futures exploding, but let's go there.
Do you know what's great, John? is the distance between you and me and our quarantine and socially distanced is the length of Suns' goal for Tottenham against Arsenal this weekend.
Oh, been watching the football this weekend,
That was
Tom.
the measurement.
I'm happy that we've got all this distance and we've got the Perspex glass between us as well. Did you notice that management put Lisa and I closer together and you way in the distance?
I am such a fossil and so high risk that they have put me, folks. I'm hermetically sealed in a room here. Megan pulled the short straw, and she's my floor manager this morning. She'll be quarantined for the next year.
Alongside Tom Key, together with Lisa Abravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro, getting you up to speed on a price action this Monday morning. From New York City, good morning. Coming up next on this program, Binky Chada, Deutsche Bank Global Chief Strategist. From New York, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, Lisa, thank you very much. A devastating wave of new COVID-19 cases over the weekend, including Florida, with a record 15,000 cases in a single day on Sunday. Doctors are now warning that ICU units across the country are near or at capacity. As for reopening schools in the U.S., Superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, Alberto Cavallo, tells NBC's Meet the Press they're working on what to do this fall, including deciding about sports programs.
We're going to obviously do our very best in our community, considering where the health data currently is.
NBC's Meet the Press can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg. Infectious disease expert Dr. Anne Rimon of UCLA says that one of the only ways to gain control of the virus spread in many of these areas is to reverse the course for some areas reopening.
We have to really double down on our efforts right now. We need to be closing bars. We need to be closing restaurants. We need to be going as far back into the early phases of lockdown as we possibly can to be able to get our arms around this.
Mexican officials say the number of confirmed COVID-19 deaths has passed 35,000, making it the country with the fourth highest total. Mars is about to be invaded by planet Earth. The U.S., China, and the United Emirates are sending spacecraft to Mars in quick succession beginning this week. It's the most sweeping effort yet to seek signs of ancient microscopic life at Mars. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com, Babbel.com.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on. You earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors?
Sweet.
The new Honda E with wind cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
There's nothing in the data that suggests that kids being in school is in any way dangerous. Parents are expecting that this fall their kids are going to have a full-time experience with their learning, and we need to follow through on that promise.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos taking some heat over the weekend, appearing there on Fox News. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bramwitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro, getting you prepared for the opening bell this Monday morning. Good morning to you all. Equity futures advance on the S&P 500, up around about 0.2%, up 0.7% after 2 straight weeks of gains on the S&P 500. We add a little bit more weight to that rally this Monday morning. And foreign exchange, the euro stronger, euro dollar up to 113.34, positive 0.3%. ECB decision this coming Thursday, Tom Keene. Then into the weekend, European leaders getting together to try and broker some kind of deal on where the money should go and who's going to pay for it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Wolfgang Monschau was extremely smart on that with a nice essay in the FT this weekend as well. Right now, there are 8 things to talk to Kevin Cirilli about, our chief Washington correspondent. I know John is really focused, Kevin, on the stimulus timing, when we're going to see it. But I've got to go back to what we just heard from the Secretary of Education. It's been 122 days, Kevin, since I've been in the office. In 122 days, I haven't heard a comment from any government official more off the mark. I guess we've got some technical issues with Kevin right now. John Farrell, let's pick right up on this. The Secretary of Education there talking about everybody wants to go back to school. That's the most off-kilter comment I have heard in 122 days. In all my contacts, John Farrell, nobody buys that.
Well, Tom, I think what we can say, where there's huge agreement, is that if we can't go back to school, we can't get anywhere near to normalising this economy. There are so many people that just cannot go back to work. And that's the focus of this administration, Tom, trying to normalise. The problem is that they opened up too quickly across many states, across the Sun Belt, and we're experiencing the downside of opening up too quickly, Tom.
Yeah, no question about it. Lisa, you and I are living this. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And Lisa, without exception, college, high school, mid-school, nursery school, there's a profound impact here that the secretary just seems to be completely removed from.
My 11-year-old says to me pretty much every morning, do you think it'll be the normal in a year, maybe in 2 years? And this is a question that a lot of people are asking, and President Trump is saying it will be in the fall. Kevin Cirilli joining us now. I think we've worked out those technical issues. Kevin, can you talk about any pushback, if there is any, about reopening the schools and doing it too quickly at a time when President Trump would like to see things get back to normal as soon as possible?
Lisa, this is the crucial debate. And quite frankly, Republicans want to have this debate, especially as they're staring down another fight of economic stimulus, because higher education, private schools, public schools are all going to be at the negotiating table for this next round of economic stimulus. And quite frankly, Republicans are saying that they want to be on the side of reopening schools, even if there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding that. Democrats are saying that if that's going to be the case, then they're going to need more money in order to make sure that the classrooms are are safer. Either way, this is a debate. I can't stress this enough, that Republicans looking at polling, looking at independent polls in swing states feel is going to help them.
Kevin, I mean, it's all political, and I get the idea that teachers' unions and Republicans and that. Is it really that simple? Is this really just about election positioning?
You know, I think that there obviously is the influence of data, particularly as it relates to if there's going to be an uptick come the fall. You're seeing universities across the country make different decisions as it relates to sporting leagues, but also whether or not students should be able to be coming back on campus. You know, anecdotally speaking, some private schools are suggesting that several days a week there might be online learning and really forcing parents to make a choice. But the bottom line here is that this has really illustrated all of the inequity, really, in the education system, and it's just one more microcosm of that.
Kevin, the president taking a new path, seen in a mask over the weekend, and I'm not going to get snarky about this. I think there's been a real shift in the rhetoric from this administration over the last several weeks. The why? You see it in the polls, don't you? There was one poll over the weekend where Democratic nominee Joe Biden led the president of the United States by 5 points. Where? In Texas. How worried is this administration?
Well, look, for the administration, they feel that they need to make this President Trump versus former Vice President Biden. And right now, it's Trump versus coronavirus. That's good for the Democrats, bad for Republicans. For the Republicans to get back on offense, based upon the conversations that I've had, Jonathan, with Republican and Democratic strategists, it's going to have to...
Hi, Arthur. How are you doing?
Well, for his standpoint, he's going to be continuing to tout his economic plan that he had put forth. He's going to also be engaging in a series of small discussions with the small business leaders. But the focus for him has been, from a strategic standpoint, to continue to make the focus about Trump.
In the meantime, health very much in the front and center. Anthony Fauci, the top infectious disease specialist, has been increasingly sidelined. Who's taking his place to lead the charge against COVID-19?
Well, Dr. Fauci has been largely politicized by both Republicans and Democrats, and you had the former vice president saying that he would have Dr. Fauci continue to serve in his administration if he were to become president. Meanwhile, last week I interviewed Dr. Deborah Birx, as she, of course, is another top official in the administration who is really working behind the scenes on issues like education and like other and reopening schools as well. But at the end of the day, I think that it's been this reliance upon the private sector in terms of some cases for economic data as it relates to whether or not businesses can reopen, Lisa. But from an education standpoint, this is to say it's volatile is an understatement, because there's so many different the education system here in America has been so politicized with public versus private, charter schools and whatnot, and that's really what's being pushed and coming to a boiling point right now.
Kevin Cirilli, always great to catch up with you, sir. Bloomberg chief, Washington correspondent. Tom Keene, pretty much everything is politicized. You expect it to be, but maybe one area that should never have been politicized, the use of masks. I cannot believe how badly that was messed up in this country. And let me be clear about this. It was not just the administration. It was not just the other side of the aisle. It was health officials as well, several months ago, telling people not to wear masks because they wanted to build up stockpiles. Fair. Is there any reason why people should be wondering why there is so much confusion still about the use of masks?
Isn't there confusion in the United Kingdom as well? I believe I saw in the Telegraph, Boris Johnson wants masks in the stores, and they're going to wait, what, John, 1 or 2 weeks to do that?
Maybe so, Tom. You have to wear them on public transport, and they still haven't got this addressed. It is just ridiculous that it is July, the middle of July, Tom. This has been going on for months, and we're finally getting some kind of movement at the government level in both the UK and the United States on an issue that should have been addressed months ago.
No, there's no question about it. And you go to the interviews that we've had, including with Stephen Riley of Imperial College, the urgency of the experts, John, is ever greater.
Futures positive this morning, Tom, up 22 on the S&P. We advanced 0.7%. Up next on this program, Binky Chada, Deutsche Bank chief global strategist, on this equity market as earnings season begins in the United States of America and worldwide. From New York City, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 18 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro. 2 hours away from the opening bell this Monday morning. Your price action shaping up as follows. After a rally to close out last week, 2 weeks of gains, and we add some weight to it this Monday morning, up 0.7% on the S&P 500. Looking out through the rest of this week, coming up tomorrow, CPI in America, Thursday, retail sales and jobless claims as well. Ahead of all of that, the euro advancing it to an ECB meeting this Thursday. Euro dollar 113.32. Treasuries really Really muted price action this morning, Tom Keene. Your yield, 0.65%. Yields unchanged.
Now in the equity market, an exceptionally important interview, a conversation with Bikram Chadha of Deutsche Bank. His notes are absolutely definitive on the details of the equity market, the correlations, and particularly what flows of money are doing. Binky Chadha, thrilled to have you with us. I read and reread your paragraph on something I lecture about, which is positioning is everything. Tell me the positioning or lack thereof of this bull market run.
So what I would say, Tom, is that, the story of basically the huge bounce that we've had since March the 23rd in the S&P 500 is really, a positioning story. So what we had is a very, very unusual shock in the sense that, it reached us all basically in terms of the news at the same time. So you have a very synchronized negative impact. The market, as you know, at the time was, max overweight across basically every spectrum of equity investors. And so we all got the news at the same time, clearly very negative shock. So everyone went basically max negative. And since then, it's been largely basically a story of what I would call, a really classic short squeeze. I think the actors relative to, the historical textbook that you may have been lecturing about is a little bit different. I think systematic strategies are much more important. And so, if you fast forward the tape basically to this week as earnings begin, I would basically say, the squeeze is basically on again. Right. I think that there is a fundamental catalyst for that, and that is, we think earnings are basically set up to beat. I can talk about that, but in the context of underweight positioning, especially in the cyclicals, as we go to reporting the banks, squeeze is basically continuing.
How has your world changed by such substantial negative real rates? How does your equity world change given what fixed income is giving you?
I would say that low rates, especially negative rates, are really bad in terms of, made life very, very difficult for active equity fund managers. And that is because, rates are clearly a factor. I mean, if you think about equities, you can take sector, you can take the market, you can sort of line them up on one side as bond-like and at the other end as most equity-like. So rates matter. And when rates are far away relative to sort of, the economic recovery or the cycle, that is basically going to cause some major issues and, has basically caused major issues. So I would argue low rates are negative for the cyclical trade, is the bottom line. And so we really do need rates to start going up to have the cyclicals perform. And, as and when the recovery happens, you would expect the cyclicals to perform. But if rates don't go up or are artificially compressed, that's not going to be very easy.
I want to be clear, Binky, then, about your view, this idea that positioning favors U.S. equities to go higher, and yet unless real yields go up, it's not going to be favorable for cyclicals. Are you saying that the technicals are favorable for big tech right now, even though I'm not sure who's shorting them? I mean, is somebody actually out there aggressively shorting Amazon and Apple and Facebook right now?
No, I wouldn't say that. What I would basically say is that, I was speaking about positioning basically at the S&P 500 at the index level. One of the things that we emphasize is that there's really been sort of a tale of two equity markets. We have the mega cap growth stocks on the one side, the 10 stocks, and they basically, fell by less and have basically been trending up, and they are well basically now above where we were at the peak prior to the breakout of the pandemic. Everybody else is, way lower. So positioning at the index level, I would differentiate from, within the equity market. I would argue, basically that where everybody is underweight is everywhere else. And, our call is basically that, it's nothing wrong with the mega cap growth stocks and tech. We just argue that it's basically run very far, but they do grow much faster. So you don't really want to be underweight. You want to be neutral, but you really want to overweight the cyclicals. I would argue, tactically, especially for the next 2 to 3 weeks, absolutely. I would argue earnings, especially for the cyclicals, are set up for a beat. if you take a look at the bottom-up consensus, we all know fell massively as the shock hit in March and April. But basically by mid-May, the bottom-up consensus had stopped falling, so the downgrades had stopped. History would tell you that basically once downgrades stop, depending on what happens to the macro data, you're going to get upgrades or downgrades. Yeah. And what we got basically is massive positive surprises on the macro data, but we also got, and so the consensus would have started to move up basically with a lag, but what we also got is the resurgence of the virus. So those upgrades basically never happened. And if you think about the resurgence of the virus in terms of the timing, it was really later, and the economic impact was later. When you look at our, macro activity pulse index, so you look at at Citigroup's CZ, you will see that the data surprises have basically gone to a place they've never been before. I mean, they're running at twice any kind of prior peak, and that should have basically seen upgrades. We didn't get those. So there's a lot of moving parts, but on net, I would basically say that, the earnings season is likely to beat. Positioning, especially in the cyclicals, is very low, and the combination of those, explains why the cyclicals and the financials were doing very well on Friday, and why the pressure on the market is basically to move up. But there is still a fair number of, unknowns, and so it should be, I'm not saying it's clear and straightforward, but it never is. The bias is still up.
Let's build on that, shall we? The allocation to cyclicals. I've had many people come on this program and others as well say you want to maintain that allocation to US growth, but if you want to take cyclical risk, take a levered play and take that play through Europe. What's your response to that, Binky?
It's very simple and very short. It's absolutely, I would be overweight Europe, I would be overweight Japan, and that's really the same call as basically being overweight the cyclicals in the U.S. If you take the U.S. equity market and divide it into the mega cap growth stocks and everybody else, so I'll just call them XMCG if you want, you basically see that they bounced from the bottom, but they've essentially gone sideways, for the last few months. If you then overlay the other regional equity markets, you'll see that they're all clustered basically around XMCG. So I think for the U.S., it's very important to divide up the two in terms of thinking about sector or stock calls. If the growth happens, and clearly it's not going to happen in a straight line, but we've had a pretty big bounce, and what I'm saying is in the data so far, and what I'm saying is that that's just really not priced in.
Binky, I'm struggling to find people who aren't overweight Europe right now. How vulnerable is that call, at least from your perspective, on a fiscal hiccup this coming weekend?
I think, relatively modestly so. I think if you look at European performance and relative to the U.S., and especially if you do it, ex-MCG, you're going to see that, the two are basically moving together. And Europe actually, exhibits a sort of more resilience. And on the policy front, I think
I'm placing stop on profit for my Japanese yen position that I opened at 107.061. So stop on profit at 107.081. It will give me £200 in profit. So, as I said, stop on profit at 107.081.
Catch up with this Binky Chana there of Deutsche Bank. Tom, I'm conditioned by the experience of the last 10 years and conditioned to be negative. I hope I'm proven wrong. But Europe has gotten together so many times, and again, it's come out the other side with a suboptimal, mediocre agreement.
John, explain the Netherlands here. I think our audience, particularly in America, doesn't understand the nuance of the Netherlands between the United Kingdom and particularly the Netherlands' relationship with Germany. There's a real tension there, isn't there?
Well, I think core Europe is often described as just Germany, but it's more than just Germany. It includes the Netherlands, it includes Austria and others as well. The Frugal Four, as Lisa mentioned at the top of the hour. Tom, the issue for me is that there has got to be some kind of fiscal transfer. They can't be loans, they need to be grants. And if there's not an agreement on that, if there's not any kind of formalized mechanism that we can get some unanimity around, then I think we're in store for a huge, huge upset coming out of the weekend, Tom. We need to see some progress. And for many people, it's not about the size of the agreement. It's about the mechanism they agree to. Because if you can get that mechanism for fiscal transfer, if you can achieve that, Tom, then over time, people will believe that sets the stage to do a whole lot more down the road.
But the immediacy here, and folks, we haven't touched on this yet with all the other issues going on, including futures up 23, is in the United States is July 13, 14, and there's a new urgency, John, to get the fiscal action done here truly by the end of the month.
Well, I think we can achieve that, Tom, because we know in America there is appetite to do something on the fiscal front collectively. Where there is a huge difference in the United States for me is the composition of that package. And Lisa, we've gone back and forth on this. There seems to be a loss of appetite from the administration to offset the shocks to income with checks to Americans, with enhanced unemployment benefits expiring at the end of the month. And most people would assume with unemployment where it is, which is simply not good enough still, and where it's said to be year-end, still close to double figures, these are things you still need to do. And what we've seen again and again and again coming out of a crisis, when the immediate crisis ends, the collective will fades. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last several weeks is evidence of that.
One big question baked into the markets, in my opinion, and Mike Pyle touched on this, is what would be the consequence in markets if Congress did not re-up the enhanced unemployment benefits as they expire, John, at the end of this month?
Well, I hope they're not expiring. I hope they are tapered somewhat to account for some of the difficulties that still remain in this economy. Coming up in the next hour, look out for a conversation with Lee Ferrich, State Street Bank Head of Macro Strategy, joining us on this program at the top of the hour as earnings season gets underway in the United States of America. From New York, the city this morning. Good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. The Florida Department of Health has reported at least 15,000 new COVID-19 cases, the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the coronavirus pandemic began. Infectious disease expert Dr. Anne Ramon of UCLA says scientists are still learning about the virus's potential long-term effects.
There is potential for long-standing injury from this virus. There's potential for cardiovascular injury, potential for neurologic injury, for pulmonary injury. We are just really beginning to understand these kinds of sequelae.
Mexican officials say the number of confirmed COVID-19 deaths has passed 35,000. Only the U.S., Brazil, and Britain have more confirmed deaths from the new coronavirus. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador insisted the development of the pandemic is positive because of Mexico's 32 states. Only 9 had an increase in infections. In California, firefighters and sailors continue to try to contain a fire on board the USS Bonhomme Richard following an explosion at the Naval Base San Diego Sunday.
Sailors across this waterfront are absolutely doing a magnificent job to save the USS Bonhomme Richard. They're fighting their ship and they're saving their ship.
Rear Admiral Philip Sobek. About 21 people were injured. Officials say the fire could burn for several days. China says it will ban entry to U.S. Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz from representatives over their criticism of the ruling Communist Party's policies. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. FedEx has reportedly notified the Washington Redskins that it will remove its signage from the stadium if the team does not change its name. The shipping giant signed a $205 million stadium naming rights deal with the Redskins in 1999. According to the Washington Post, FedEx notified the team in a July 2nd private letter it will remove its name after the NFL's 2020 season. Former New York Yankees star Alex Rodriguez and actress Jennifer Lopez are behind a group that has offered about $1.7 billion to buy the New York Mets. That's according to the New York Post, which reports Mets chief operating officer Jeff Wilpon would prefer to sell the team to the Rodriguez Group if their offer is close to the best bid at the end of the auction. Billionaire hedge fund titan Steve Cohen has also made an offer. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out
in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
More retail participation is very important. It broadens the marketplace, and importantly, it means society buys into a market-based system even more. However, you don't want retail to be the victim of a head fake.
Have we become a victim of a head fake already? That was Mohammed Al-Arian there of Bloomberg Opinion and Chief Economic Advisor to Allianz from New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane, together with Lisa Abravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro, live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. And your equity market closing out last week for a second straight week of gains on the S&P 500 and adding some weight to that rally this Monday morning. Back through 3,200, up 22 points on the S&P and positive 0.7%. There is your euro strength, a story that many people are starting to line up behind. Euro dollar right now 113.31 and Treasury stable. Muted price action through the morning so far, Tom Keane. 0.65% is your yield on a US 10-year.
Oh, very good, John. And then let's bring it right over to where we are in earnings this week. And I want to go granular here and go into my vast knowledge of the German language. This from Credit Suisse this morning. The importance and thus the number of branches will therefore continue to decline. Measuring the branches in America, Shonali Basak of Bloomberg News. Shonali, to me, this is incredibly important. The idea of the layoffs and jobs to come. How much of this is because the pandemic has taught us it's a digital banking future?
Well, we knew that before, and we certainly know that now in full force. We had that great scoop last week about Wells Fargo cutting jobs. They kept their headcount quite high relative to the other banks. So to see them now cut just is facing reality, but it's also bracing for a future where they might not be able to earn as much in revenue with interest rates as low as they are.
Shonali, consumers are often reluctant to make the change. This has forced them to change, pushed many people towards digital banking, and I wonder if that accelerates the cuts elsewhere that Tom describes.
We're not going to see the cuts in full force this year. Remember, the banks came into this year thinking they would be the good guys. So for them to sit there and cut jobs in full force right now won't look good to their employees. It won't look good to the regulators. And so they'll be pretty hesitant to make sweeping cuts. But next year, they may be forced to reckon with that if their net income situation is this severe.
All right, well, we're going to get a read on the net income situation for the big U.S. banks, starting with J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup, all reporting tomorrow, kicking off the week of earnings from the big banks. My understanding is people are expecting very strong results on the trading revenues, the FICC trading revenues in particular. Investment banking revenues will be bolstered by some of the government programs, PPP, et cetera. And then on the net interest margin, as well as loan losses, that will be a point of pain. Tell us what people are expecting for the week ahead.
A lot of those loan losses in the first quarter, Lisa, had come from the credit card businesses. But let me tell you something else. 8% of all U.S. mortgages are either past due or delinquent. And so we're going to want to see how those mortgages really play into the weakness in these banks that we didn't see in the quarter prior. And consumer spending might also be tumbling, which will impact these very big banks.
I mean, Shirley, this is great, but let me cut to the chase. It could be Mr. Moynihan, Mr. Corbett, whoever. Let's start with Mr. Dimon. Yeah. What is Jamie Dimon actually going to do on a conference call to signal the view forward?
So far, he's been pretty positive. He believes that it would get better toward the end of the year. That was a view from about a month ago. Let's see if he keeps up that.
Hello, Bartek. How are you? You all right?
The next stimulus will be far less money, and it may not be checks into the pockets of many Americans. So that will all affect his income moving forward. And the idea that, at Bank of America, 30% of small businesses were in deferral. What does that look like at J.P. Morgan, which also is banking a lot of small businesses?
Shanali, deferral is different to a loan loss, and I wonder how much clarity we'll get on that over the next several days, whether these stories are improving as the reopening is commenced.
Yes, that's a great question, John. S&P actually thinks a third of all of these deferrals will turn into delinquencies. So that's significant. What does that equate to? $128 billion worth of loan losses across the industry. That is significant. We only saw $9 billion at J.P. Morgan in provisions in the first quarter. Again, we expect the second quarter to be bigger. But S&P now, which is doing the downgrades, believes that this will mount significantly through the end of the year and into next year.
Shanali, it's fascinating to me that we're probably going to see the loan losses be the biggest pain for Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, and Bank of America, some of the biggest lenders. And then you've got the Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley that are going to perhaps benefit more just purely by the construction of their businesses from the boom in investment banking and FICC and equity trading. Is that what people are expecting? Much better results from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley than the other large U.S. banks?
Listen, J.P. Morgan is still a big investment bank, and it's the biggest FICC business on Wall Street. What is the expectation? About $700 million more in fixed income trading. That's compared with about $800 million less in net interest income. And so it doesn't pair off as perfectly as you would think, even when they're hitting these major, major highs. There's also a question for Goldman, even with that fixed income trading, with them so close to their stress capital buffer, what is their capital return story going to be to shareholders in the coming months?
So what's the Goldman story this time around? I mean, I've really lost this, Shanali. I've got my eye off the Goldman Sachs ball here. What does Mr. Solomon need to do this earnings season?
So their consumer business has been benefiting from what you guys were talking about at the beginning, that digital banking model. They have the benefit of starting from the ground up. But this is such a small part of their business still.
It's like it's not existent, isn't it?
Exactly. And so they made these long-term plans. Can they hold those plans steady as they start to change their bank?
Hey, Shanali.
Question.
Great to catch up with you as always. Shanali Basak there, Bloomberg Wall Street correspondent, will be with us through the week as the big banks report here in the United States. Tom, already getting a sense of this, that this, of course, is a relative game of expectations going into earnings season. Binky Chadha of Deutsche Bank touched on this, that for the financials, the bar is so much lower going into earnings season than, say, big tech, which is why some people think the risk is skewed asymmetrically towards the financials and the more cyclical areas of this market, beating expectations. And big tech, Tom, the bar is so high and the rally has been so big into earnings season. It's a big one to hurdle.
And you see it, of course, with Bassinet at Citigroup and Blackledge at Cowen upping their price targets on Amazon, just as one example. John, I'll buy that theme, but the answer is tech got it where it got by outperforming. So, I wouldn't bet against it. But, John, it really doesn't matter because I'm in the triple leveraged all-cash fund. And, I may, buy the Keefe Bruyette Bank Index, just nibble
Just nibble? You're going to come out of cash.
No, I didn't say that. I'm thinking about it.
Just nibble. That's the technical term.
I'm looking for an entry point.
Lisa's worried. Lisa's just sitting here worried.
That's a top. You're going to nibble. That means it's all over. I will say, though, when it comes to banks, when you talk about pessimism, the KBW Bank Index, just to give you the sense, John, it is down 34% year to date. So just to give you a sense of the dramatic underperformance, that is not a very high expectation. They are treated like utilities. Now, the question is, can they prove that they are more than that going forward, John?
Not unique to America either. Tom mentioned Credit Suisse a little bit earlier this morning. Stock's still down around about 20-something% year to date so far. It's been painful. Guys, counting you down to the opening bell, we are positive up 0.7% on the S&P 500. We advance by around about 22 points on the S&P, building on the rally of the last couple of weeks. We've seen the narrow breadth. Will it start to broaden out a little bit more? From New York, alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor activities, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Avoid shared surfaces like swings or benches. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn. How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
This is Mike Golick from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Trey Wingo, my son, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way to ensure that there was a financial incentive for being able to get paid for K to go there, if that makes sense. But it's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything, from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk off the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Latest financial and business news anywhere. We've actually given the matter quite a bit of thought.
Let's get now to our guest joining us from Bangkok. She joins us on the phone from the Hudson Valley.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
What does that moral leadership look like to you at
Bloomberg? The world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
The fact is we are likely facing a slower growth, a sluggish economy as we do recover out of this, and that is a great backdrop for secular growth.
A lot of businesses are not buying into the V. They see a different destination regardless of the journey.
People who have got the wrong impression from the data from May and June. What really happened is the economy sort of fell off a cliff, hit a trampoline and bounced.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television. Jonathan Farrow, Tom Keene, Lisa Bramwitz. Thrilled that you're with us this morning. What you need to know on the Monday backdrop, futures not only up, but they advanced through the hour here. Futures up 22, Dow futures up 206 with a risk-on feel to the market. It's an exceptionally busy week, John Farrow. And what I find fascinating,
I'm moving my stop on profit for Japanese yen to 107, 101. So stop on profit to 107, 101. It will give me 400 pounds in profit. Okay?
Market, Thomas. Increasingly, we get guest after guest lining up behind a long Europe view. That's going to get a test this weekend.
And the part of the test is going to be the bank earnings. Just speaking with Sonali Basak about this. Lisa Bramwitz, I guess we have a flat yield curve. I guess we've got a completely odd bond market. How does that benefit the banks? The answer is we don't know.
Well, the answer is it does not, right? I mean, the flattened yield curve is negative for the banks because you borrow short, you lend long, you earn nothing for it if the yield curve is flat. On the other hand, the low rate regime has pushed corporations to borrow record amounts of money, and this has been a huge boon in investment banking fees for the big banks, which is one of the reasons why people are expecting such a hit there. I will say this, Tom. I looked at high-yield bond trading volumes recently for the year, and on average, they are significantly higher than the previous all-time high. So another point of strength for the banks will be in the FICC trading revenues.
Part of it worldwide, folks, is, of course, this continuing pandemic. And moments ago, someone who's really committed to Bloomberg surveillance put out a blistering tweet on the president. I want to read it to you off the screen. This is from the acclaimed Peter Hotez of Baylor, and it is the most scathing tweet I've seen in this pandemic. The President of the United States retweeted this nonsense. It says to me, one, he lacks interest in slowing or halting the virus. The strategy is continued deflecting, first China, then the World Health Organization, and now the scientists themselves. Mr. Hotez goes on to say of the president, we'll need to seek a branch of government still willing or able to lead a federal response. John, this is a backdrop to all we talk about in economics, finance, and investment.
Tom, let's be really clear about this. Every single aspect of government worldwide deserves to be criticized for their response to this crisis. The WHO said travel curbs didn't help. Are we saying the WHO is immune from criticism? They should not be. Mayor Bill de Blasio in this city in early March came out and said, get out on the town. That was what the mayor of New York City had to say to the people of New York. Get out on the town. He is worthy of criticism as well. The government, the federal government, is of course also worthy of criticism as well. And what is important here, Tom, is learning from mistakes and learning from them quickly. And what we need at the federal level was something a whole lot quicker, a whole lot earlier. And that was a coherent strategy on how we safely reopen these economies. And we pushed it too far, and we went too soon, and we went too quickly.
We'll continue to these interviews on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television through the week, particularly our commitment to the Johns Hopkins University. Right now, you need a briefing on this Monday on the state of the markets, and we do this with futures up 22, Dow futures up 195, a modest risk on feel. Lee Farage is a State Street head of macro strategy and, of course, decades of perspective. Lee Farage, why is this time different? If I want to participate in the equity markets, what's different now than every other crisis we've had, once-in-a-lifetime crisis?
I guess what's different now is the sheer size of this policy response. I mean, I think we've never seen zero rates across the world. We've never seen the level of QE that we're getting now. So in terms of monetary policy, that's the big difference this time. Previously you'd have seen a monetary policy response, but there would have still been, an interest rate on cash or some sort of interest rate on bonds. We're not getting anything here, okay? So, the TINA trade, there is no alternative, is the one that is clearly winning out now. Despite all the risks that you've sort of highlighted and talked about and we know are out there, the investors are just shrugging it off and saying, well, this thing keeps going up, I'm getting zero everywhere else. That's why I've got to be in it.
Lee, we've just witnessed the biggest fiscal policy experiment maybe in economic history. Is the verdict in yet? How successful has it been?
It depends on the follow-up. Because what the fiscal response we saw in the U.S. is dated. The $600 a month in extra unemployment insurance runs out on July 31st. Various other measures, the PPP loans start to get converted to grants, which means that people can be laid off, in the next few weeks. So, we are facing, a potential fiscal cliff in the U.S. I mean, the CARES Act was huge in terms of helping to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. I mean, compensation levels fell by $840 billion in April. But what we saw was that the government spending or government transfers went up by $3 trillion. $2.8 trillion of that was the CARES Act. So, we've seen consumers protected by these huge fiscal transfers, but they run out, and we still have a very high unemployment rate. We're not, because of the respread of the virus or the latest surge in the virus, we're sort of going backwards or pausing on the reopening. So still a lot of people are going to still be out of work, and if they start to lose this benefit, then that's got to impact the economy in Q3.
I'm moving further my stop on profit for Japanese yen to 107.11.
But now when we go into Q3, it's like, okay, so where's the next impetus going to come from? Because, 20-odd states are pausing or rolling back the reopenings, and we've got this fiscal cliff. So, that's why Q3 is going to be so challenging. But I think, in Congress, they're probably looking at the data going, okay, we're over the worst, we're gradually reopening, we can pare back the fiscal stimulus, but I think that would be a huge mistake.
Lee, it seems like this is not unknown, and a lot of the administration has come out and said that they would like to see more stimulus, perhaps not an extension of the unemployment benefits as they are stated as such. Yet there is push for this. What's your feeling in terms of what the downside risk is to stocks should they not extend the enhanced unemployment benefits?
It'll take a while to come through. I mean, as I said before, stocks can shrug off any sort of bad news. I mean, I've been completely surprised given what we're seeing on the virus numbers and given what that's got to mean for reopenings and activity going forward, the stocks are still where they are. So, it's very hard to say that's going to hurt stocks by that amount. But at some point, this wall of negative news has to make investors think about, the risk-reward of stocks, particularly at these sort of levels, particularly the stocks that are actually going up, because it's a very, very narrow rally. If you looked at an equally weighted S&P against the cap-weighted index that we always look at, the gap between the two in terms of year-on-year terms is about 12%. It's the widest since 1998. So this is a very, very concentrated rally in few stocks which have become very, very, very richly valued. So it's when that risk-reward tips over. Now, does the lack of a fiscal stimulus mean that risk-reward tips over? Maybe, and we get closer to the election, and that becomes more of an issue as well. So
yeah.
There are plenty of negatives out there, but so far the market keeps ignoring it. I mean, I'm certainly leaning on the bearish side, but it's hard in the face of the price action.
Well, Lee, this is what's amazing to me. You point to the fundamental economy, and it is negative as far as you can see. Once you withdraw stimulus, there is a lot of negativity out there, and yet what people point to that's supporting everything is not only the fiscal money, but the monetary policy, which not only has flooded the system with cash, but also has a promise of doing whatever it takes. Why are you willing to fight against that, to be bearish, given the fact that you have officials on all sides of the world doubling down on this pledge?
No, it's a very good point. I mean, I think I mean, I guess I'm sort of a bit old school in so much as I don't believe you can just create money out of nothing continuously without any pullback on that. And I think, you know, where the market looks at it, the best performing asset this year is and over the last couple of years, it's not stocks, it's gold. You know, gold is your hedge against this continuous increase in central bank balance sheets. Gold provides you that sort of hedge against the debasement of fiat currencies. So gold is actually outperforming stocks. So, you know, we can talk about stocks doing well, but actually it's a very, very small subgroup, and there are other asset classes such as gold that are doing better. So yes, in the world we're in, overall stocks are going to go up, but at some point you've got to start questioning whether the authorities can continue to just keep printing, and keep supporting an underlying economy that, as you rightly say, would be collapsing without this support.
Lee, we don't need to see you. I can just imagine you right now, the exasperation of someone with a bearish stance on this market. Lee, great to catch up. Lee Ferridge of State Street. Lee, so let's think about it. Just reflect, just quickly. The post-COVID, the post-shutdown tights, June 5th, on high-yield credit. The post-shutdown steepness, the peak of the yield curve, June 5th also. A couple of days later, the equity market peaked as well. I think we have to acknowledge that this market has adjusted to the risks that have started to come back to the surface over the last month.
Certainly, if you look away from tech, you see that, right? I mean, it's big tech and then everybody else, which has actually seen declines recently. And even in high-yield debt, it's actually underperformed investment-grade credit. The question is whether we're going to get a wave of systematic bankruptcies that could perhaps shake this feeling that central bank cash will flood the market. But really, there is this feeling on the higher-level quality stuff, the Fed's got your back.
The fiscal component, absolutely massive this month as well. Coming up on this program, Lewis Alexander, Nomura chief U.S. economist. Coming up tomorrow, retail sales will come Thursday. CPI will come tomorrow. A lot of economic data this week as we count you down to an ECB decision and a meeting of the great European leaders. I'll take a deep breath too. Equity futures up 22 on the S&P, up 0.7% after a 2-week rally. We add a little bit of weight to it. This is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Lisa, John, there are staggering new COVID-19 infection numbers from Florida with a record 15,300 cases on Sunday alone, surpassing California and New York. Their ICU units are quickly filling to the brim with patients, and officials are warning that they should be at capacity soon. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez says increased hospitalizations should also lead to a rise in their death toll.
We just crossed the threshold. I think we had 196 ventilators back then. We just went over 200 yesterday. And so that means that there's no doubt that the death rate will most likely go up over the next week or two. And so that's something that our residents should be expecting.
President Trump and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos are pushing all schools to fully reopen in the fall. DeVos stressed that message on CNN's State of the Union.
Kids need to be back in school, and that school leaders across the country need to be making plans to do just that. There's going to be the exception to the rule, but the rule should be that kids go back to school this fall. And where there are little flare-ups or hot spots, that can be dealt with on a school-by-school or a case-by-case basis.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi blasted the White House for their push, calling it appalling. A new poll shows Democratic nominee Joe Biden has taken a 5-point lead over President Trump among voters in Texas, following a surge in coronavirus cases. Dallas Morning News University of Texas at Tyler poll has Biden with 46% compared to 41% for Trump. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com, Babbel.com.
When your tenants have an overflowing block sink right in the middle of your busy day, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super drainage engineer in 4 hours before you've even sat down to dinner. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers, and electricians. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Millions of people in the UK struggle to put food on the table. That's why Asda's donated £23 million to FareShare and the Trussell Trust since 2018. Please help us do more by donating to our Fight Hunger trolleys in store. Asda. We're all in this together. FareShare and the Trussell Trust are registered charities. See asda.com/fight hunger.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You're going to see passage of a Phase 4 stimulus deal by the summer recess. And then thereafter, there's going to be wariness to bring on more debt. You cannot drive.
I'm keep moving up my stop on profit for Japanese yen, and I'm moving up to 107.161. It will give me £1,000 of profit if it will close below this position. Yep. So the stop on profit at 107.161.
100 futures up 0.7%. Alongside Lisa Abramovich, together with Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. And Tom Keene, that is where the focus is. The next steps from fiscal authorities.
You know, there's no question about it. The fiscal authorities matter, but also the monetary update. As you know, John, there's important decisions this week. Bank of Japan has a webinar with Francine Lacroix that will go on with the governor of the Bank of England and the president of the New York Fed, and that's a good place to start with our Michael McKee and Economic Briefing, our international economics and policy correspondent. Michael McKee, very simple. John Williams will be with Francine Lacroix today, and he is the man of the R-Stard. Does any of this theory that you go out to Jackson Hole in a normal year and pontificate on, does any theory matter anymore like R-Stard?
Not really. We know our star is basically zero at this point. There's no growth and there's no potential growth to be measured at the moment. So the Fed, like all central banks, are basically stuck at zero for the foreseeable future, which means that even with the ECB, the Bank of Japan meeting this week, don't expect any monetary policy moves. Maybe something later in the year, but remember, they're all about interest rates. Interest rates are at zero. Not much more they can do. It is, as John was saying, the fiscal authorities who matter right now.
Michael, what's so important here is the idea of what will be the price for this, the free lunch idea. With all your years of experience, what's the price out for the foreseeable future that we're all going to pay?
Well, that's the hard thing to know. There was always a theory that people would change their spending habits because they would expect taxes would have to go up if there was a big budget deficit. So far, the change in spending habits is due to the virus, not due to potential for taxes in the future. And we don't know at what point we get any kind of crowding out, if we do, in the markets from all of the deficit spending that's being done in this country and others. So it's kind of a real-time experiment. A lot of people like to say, hey, it's MMT. It's not really, in the sense that we're not prepared to raise taxes to step in front of inflation as MMT would have you do. But it is a new world in which deficit spending has become the norm, and tremendous deficit spending, not just a little bit.
Mike, there is a question. We know that the Fed is going to remain on zero for the foreseeable future. Some question about negative rates, although right now the Feds are not interested in discussing it. They're not thinking about raising rates. There is a question how much Federal Reserve officials will backstop companies that are the closest to bankruptcy, perhaps that otherwise would go bankrupt had it not been for the pandemic, especially as there's growing concern about zombie companies and the halting of the creative destruction process in the United States that has been a hallmark of this nation.
Well, that's an interesting question because a lot of people are focused on this zombie company idea. The problem you have is measuring exactly who would be a zombie company and who might find traction otherwise. Now, the Fed, its lending programs for businesses have attracted less interest than people thought. The Main Street program and the larger company lending programs that the Treasury is administering, because they took so long to get set up. A lot of companies went to banks, and with interest rates so low, they managed to get either loans or be able to go into the bond market and refinance. And we'll have to see as the economy continues and if it starts to grow, whether some of those companies just give up the ghost. We have seen a lot of bankruptcies announced in the last couple of months. So it may be that the zombie company theory doesn't hold.
Big question, Mike, how quickly these economies can continue to reopen, even in places where they've actually dealt with the pandemic rather well, in the opinion of many. Hong Kong headlines dropping across the Bloomberg right now that Hong Kong will cap all public gatherings of 4 people because of this pandemic. They go even further. They will ban dine-in services at eateries from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. They will shut gyms and game arcades as well for 7 days, Mike. This just underlining how difficult it is going to be to A, recover quickly, and B, normalize anytime soon.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that in the United States with the southern tier of states now bright red in terms of spikes of the COVID virus, and states that did not want to shut down starting to roll back their reopenings, and that's going to have an effect on jobs. The home base people who measure small business employment showing a definite leveling off and is starting to turn down in those states. It just means that we're entering kind of a phase 2 of the economic recovery, if not a phase 2 of the pandemic, and that is companies come back, they either have to close down again or they find they can't make it and they start laying off workers again.
You know, this is so important. I mean, John, that Hong Kong news is really difficult. I love going to American Pool when I'm in Hong Kong. They've got, you know, the arcades in Hong Kong are really, really different from anywhere else in the world. Michael McKee, furloughs and layoffs. Give us an update. Where are we?
We're starting to see a tremendous number, Tom. We saw over the past week that Wells Fargo announced 36,000. Well, Wells Fargo announced a plan for thousands of jobs. United Airlines, 36,000 jobs.
Layoffs, firings.
Harley Davidson, awful lot of layoffs and firings starting to be announced because demand is not returning at the same time as employees. Yeah. And this doesn't count all the restaurants that tried to reopen and maybe don't have the business, and people will be laid off. The National Federation of Independent Business, the small business people, say 22% of their membership expect to fire workers even after they've reopened.
Okay, John, this is the mystery. Michael McKee, thank you so much, our chief economic correspondent. John Farrell, to me, this is the mystery of the end of July. Weekly jobless claims into the July jobs report, and what Mike McKee just said there, to me, other than the pandemic, is the most emotional thing.
Well, the claims have stayed elevated throughout all of this over the last several weeks. Even at the net change at the headline number in the payrolls report over the last couple of months has really surprised to the upside. Tom, the story is the churn beneath the surface. The temporary workers have started to come back into the workforce as we reopen in the United States. But the real story about the scarring is in the permanent layoffs, Tom, and that's been building over the last couple of months. And I imagine, and I don't like the idea of it, but I imagine in the months to come as well, that story will continue, Tom.
No, there's no question about it. It's going to continue forward. And, you know, I look at it all, John, with the labor economy folding into what we see in the stock market. Futures up 22 right now, and it's really maybe more than any time I've ever seen. It's two separate worlds.
We advanced 0.7% on the S&P 500. I'll whip through some of the price action for you, Tom. We do not change on the headlines coming out of Hong Kong. We stay elevated, up by 22 points on the S&P, up by around about 0.7%. Outside of equities, if we can get to the bond market, I'll run you through things pretty quickly. Some data to look out for in the week ahead. We will have CPI coming out tomorrow and retail sales in America coming this Thursday. Ahead of that, pretty muted price action. Your Treasury market pretty much unchanged. Your 10-year yield coming up just a single basis point on a 10-year. We advanced to 0.653%. That's the Treasury market. In the FX market, huge focus on Europe through the week. The ECB decision coming up this Thursday, and then fiscal authorities, European leaders meeting this Friday and into the weekend. Can they find agreement on the next steps? Ahead of that, euro-dollar positive. We move higher on the euro, just a slightly weaker dollar. 1 hour away from the opening bell, the conversation continues on the economy. Lewis Alexander, Nomura chief U.S. economist, joins us next from New York. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is Millions of people in the UK struggle to put food on the table. That's why Asda's donated £23 million to Fair Share and the Trussell Trust since 2018. Please help us do more by donating to our Fight Hunger trolleys in store. Asda, we're all in this together. Fair Share and the Trussell Trust are registered charities. See asda.com/fight hunger.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
There's a lift to this market this Monday morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro from New York. We're live on Bloomberg TV and radio, 1 hour away from the opening bell in New York. Here's your price action. Adding a little bit more weight to the equity rally of the last couple of weeks. On the S&P 500, we advanced by around about 0.6%, up 21 points. Call it 20 points higher on the S&P 500. The financials rallying into earnings. JP Morgan up at a pre-market by 1.7%. Amazon, Cowen with a new street high price target, advancing to 3,700, up 3,200 right now on Amazon, and up around about 1.8%. So big tech doing nicely this morning, Tom, and a financials firmer going into earnings season as well, giving futures a lift, advancing 0.6%.
Yeah, nice lift to the market. Maybe not what we saw an hour ago, John, but nevertheless up. It's really got a huge correlated risk-on feel. Right now, what we're doing on a Monday is we're resetting, and you can do that with the chief U.S. economist for Nomura Securities, Louis Alexander. He writes exceptionally thoughtful notes, all of this with his backdrop of public service to the nation as well. Dr. Alexander, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to go to a single sentence buried in your report, which is a brilliant summary on the uncertainties of China. Now, we've just seen the virus news out of Hong Kong, but away from that is your exceptionally tepid call on the second half for China. Can that derail global recovery?
Look, I think the concern about China is it's actually quite vulnerable to what's going on in the rest of the world. And in some ways, they were relatively successful at dealing with COVID-19. And the problem is their recovery at this point is constrained by what's going on in the rest of the world. So in some ways, I would draw it the other direction. China can't do more unless the rest of the world recovers and export demand picks up. And at that point, that's the real constraint on China.
Tell us about export demand. Bloomberg has a wonderful summed world trade chart, which, as you know, over the last decade is just flat out grim, ebbing. We're going away from what we knew in our childhoods. Give us an update on the state of the volumes of world trade.
Well, look, we had a kind of 25-year period when trade was growing much more rapidly than global GDP. That actually stopped a while ago, and to a certain extent, we've been in a period where globalization has not been the same kind of impetus to growth. Now, obviously, with COVID-19, everything has collapsed, and that's just a general function of activity around the world. And the problem is the parts of the world that are more dependent on trade than any others, and China's the head of it, has been, in some senses, constrained by where we're going to go going forward. I think one of the big questions after the U.S. election is what's going to happen with trade. You heard Vice President Biden last week talk about this Buy America program. He didn't talk about trade policy in great detail last week, but if you look kind of across what he's saying, I don't think we should expect some big change, some big movement back towards a commitment to free trade that you saw under previous Democratic administrations. And so while I'm hopeful that we'll get a cyclical recovery as we all recover from COVID-19 over the next couple of years with vaccines and all of that, we're not going back to that period when globalization is really driving the global economy.
Yeah, well, Lou, ahead of the election, we're also going to be getting a lot of unemployment figures. You're expecting the unemployment rate to fall back down near 10% by the end of this year, and yet some of the soft data, the high-frequency data that people are looking at show an increasing weakening in any potential bounce back. How much does that play into a potentially higher unemployment rate, in your view, at the end of the year this year?
So, look, I think there's certainly the risk of that, and I would totally agree that high-frequency data is pointing towards a moderation and potentially even a decline over the next coming weeks and months. But I would note that the potential for lockdowns is regional. It's not national. It's very different from what we saw in March and April. And we think there will be a continued recovery. We expect to get a phase 4 fiscal deal within the next 2 weeks, and that will be important to sort of continue this on. So I would note the fact that continuing claims for unemployment have continued to come down, even in an environment where initial claims remain very high. There is an awful lot of reallocation going on at this point. And look, there's a huge amount of uncertainty about where the economy is going to be. I would note that even at 10%, that's still the peak of where the unemployment rate was a decade ago. Yeah. And so while that is recovery from where we are now, that's still a very adverse outcome.
Lou, you said that you expect a $1.5 trillion fiscal add-on at some point in the next couple of months. I want to talk about the composition, because a lot of people saying the enhanced unemployment benefits had the most direct effect on economic spending, on just the consumer outlook in general. How important is the composition of that $1.5 trillion package that you're expecting for your outlook to be correct?
It is important. I mean, there are different pieces to it. Obviously, you have to do something to make up for the unemployment benefits that are going to come off at the end of July. I think it's unlikely that they will be extended in exactly the same form that they are now, but you need something that replaces that. That's one thing. Second, you do need more support for small businesses, essentially some sort of additional resources that go to support businesses directly. You need also money for state and local governments, because all of the talk of potential layoffs in businesses, if we don't get more support for state and locals, you're going to see the same thing on state and local governments. I think those three pieces all have to be there for this to work. Now, there's also been discussion of another round of tax rebates. To the extent that that's general support, it's not a bad thing to do that. But in some sense, I think you've got to have that. Extend the unemployment benefits, more help for business, but also state and local governments.
Lou, you've gone through a series of issues there. To some degree, you need to read the political tea leaves to answer the following question, but I wonder on what particular issue you think this effort might come unstuck.
I think there are some questions about how you define the unemployment benefits and the support for business. There has been some criticism of the very high replacement rates for the unemployment benefits. So Republicans want to change the structure of that. If they really press that issue, that could become a stumbling block. I think there's also a question of what businesses are going to have access to the support. There's obviously been some criticism of the PPP program. There's some restrictions that the Democrats want to put on that. There's also this liability issue that's been important to McConnell, depending on about giving businesses essentially liability protection if workers get COVID for coming back to work. How you define that, those are all issues that if strong advocates on one side or the other of those really want to press the issue, they can delay things. I'm hopeful that everybody recognizes how important this is, that this will get done, and it will get done quickly, i.e. before the end of this month. That's our expectation. But if we're wrong about that, that'll be a big deal.
Lou Alexander, to go back to James Tobin, the giant of Yale University, there was a book years ago. It always comes in a slowdown. Is growth obsolete? Away from the selected tech names, is growth obsolete?
I think very much not. Look, there's another old economist who's important here, Art Oken, who stressed the importance of the gap between actual employment and actual output and potential output as being essentially this social loss. I think this is one of those times when that's very, very important. We've got an economy that is underproducing. We've got an awful lot of people who are unemployed. That's a huge cost, and any things we can do to diminish that over time are very important. That's another way of thinking about that growth question.
Position closed on Japanese yen at 107.161. I have total profit £1,000.
second stage of this shock. It's the more persistent, extended period of time of being below potential and below capacity. Remember, we caught up with Bridgewater's Bob Prince just a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about a duration mismatch. The episode could be 18 months long. The Band-Aid is just 3 months, 4 months of fiscal responses to all of this, Tom. And this Band-Aid essentially expires in many ways at the end of this month, and then we've got to apply another one, and most likely another one. Will the collective will to do that be there into 2021?
Different cultures are doing this better, John. I think the United Kingdom's actually doing it better with maybe a more constrained and closed economy. John, what's so important here is just the blunt instrument of percent of GDP. How much of this is Washington helping as a percent of GDP? And the answer is they're late right now. They've got to catch up.
Well, Tom, this is the issue. You mentioned Europe, and Lisa, I think you can weigh in on this. The subtle differences in the fiscal response to all of this. Europe has made a much bigger push, put a much bigger emphasis on huge, broad-based furlough programs, keeping people much closer to their employers. We did it to some degree with a small business program here in the United States, but not to the degree Europe has done it in. And it makes some people more constructive about the future in Europe, that we've managed to keep people closer to their employers, perhaps on the continent, than we have in the United States. The United States puts much more emphasis on the direct offset to the shocks to income. So that would be the checks to Americans and the enhanced unemployment benefits as well. The problem with what the US has done is it might have propped up consumption over the last couple of months, but it expires month end. And some of these programs over in Europe, the furlough programs in the UK, for instance, they go through all the way into October. It's just a difference in approach here that might show up in the data in the months to come.
And right now, it seems like that is a prescription, the ongoing prescription, the European approach does seem to have a more fitting sort of circumstance given what we're facing. That said, John, what we see in the United States is typically a culture of more creative destruction. And I really want to come back to this point, this idea that, yes, they're not backing the employees and forcing employers to keep their employees, and they're allowing things to break down and then restart. And that's been credited for one of the reasons for the dynamism of the U.S. economy. Now, the U.S. is going much more toward the European model, and the question is, are they going far enough? And is this going to completely change the dynamism of this nation?
Are they going far enough, or have they gone too far already, which is what some people think? Alongside Lisa Bramers, together with Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. In your market right now, around about 50 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City, with futures nicely elevated, up 20 points on the S&P and change. We advanced by 0.6%. From New York this morning, good morning, at 3,200 on the S&P 500. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Lisa, John. The Florida Department of Health has reported more than 15,000 new COVID-19 cases, the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the pandemic began. Republican Miami Mayor Francis Suarez explained implementing stay-at-home orders again for his city.
I think what gets us there is our hospital capacity. I think if our hospitals tell us, look, we just are getting to the point where we cannot risk any more people getting sick, that's what's probably going to get us there, and that's something that we're looking at on a day-to-day basis.
Meanwhile, New York City, once the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak, reported its first day with 0 confirmed or probable virus deaths since the pandemic hit New York State. It marked the end of a 4-month stretch since the city reported its first COVID-19 fatality on March 11th. Criticism continues from both sides of the aisle after President Trump commuted the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor Roger Stone. Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff.
It is a shockingly corrupt abuse of the president to commute the sentence of someone who not only lied to Congress, not only obstructed the investigation, not only intimidated witnesses, but did so to cover up for the president. And Stone made no secret of the fact that he wanted this relief and that he was withholding information to protect the president.
The White House earlier said Stone is a victim of the Russia hoax. Actress Kelly Preston has died after a 2-year battle with breast cancer at the age of 57. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. One hotel and apartment operator is now offering hotel rooms as office space.
We wanted to be ahead of the curve.
Amir Richelsky, CEO at Saper Corp, says that might attract consumers who just need to get away from the work-from-home grind.
A day trip for individuals who would like to, retreat and then to have a luxurious environment at this time. To escape from the stress on the day-to-day that they have.
Richelsky also says companies might also rent out a whole floor in its hotels outfitted with fast internet, printers, other amenities.
Corporates who are not ready to come back to a full office occupancy and would be able to take a floor, to take a few rooms in the hotel.
Hotels, of course, are an unloved real estate group right now. Many of them are still empty. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable, the lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda, the power of dreams.
This is the moment. A new start. Now the UK has left the EU. Time for us to get going.
To seize new opportunities as we transition to our new relationship.
Get moving.
It's in our hands now.
So we've got to get started.
Truck drivers.
Tech entrepreneurs.
Engineers.
Fishermen.
Farmers. Lawyers. Makers. Holiday makers.
Creators.
Big business. Small business. Traveling for business.
We all need to plan ahead. Check the guidance. Make the changes. And let's get going.
Sign up now at gov.uk/transition and check, change, go for the UK's new start.
Heroes. They're the ones we turn to in our darkest hour. Like when you blow a fuse and the lights go off. From electrics to heating, plumbing to plastering, at Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
Fast forward the tape basically to this week as earnings begin. I would basically say, the squeeze is basically on again. I think that there is a fundamental catalyst for that, and that is, we think earnings are basically set up to beat.
Biggie Charter there at Deutsche Bank on earnings season as that begins in the United States of America. Looking forward to catching up with the PepsiCo CFO a little bit later this morning, Tom Keene, as I step away to get you set up for the opening round. That interview taking place in around about 20 minutes time or so, Tom.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, John, and clearly risk on as we go into the open as well. Right now, in an interview that was to be important, but is now ever more important with what we've seen going back and forth between the scientists like Peter Hotez at Baylor and a president of the United States. Joining us now, Marta Wyszynska from Duke Margolis, and with her public service. Thrilled that she could be with us today. This linkage of economics, of our policy and statistics into our medicine as well. Again, the Duke Margolis Center for Health Policy and the deputy director there. Professor, thank you so much for being with us today. We now have a president going after the science within this pandemic. How do the scientists defend themselves?
I think what the scientists do is what they always do, is put out the facts and talk about what needs to be done to get us out and have us get through this pandemic.
All right. Well, Dr. Wyszynska, what are the facts when it comes to getting kids back to school? One of the pivotal issues, President Trump saying it is time, and his health secretary saying that the risks are overstated. Are they?
The risks aren't overstated, but I do agree that it's really important for the kids to get back to school. The question is not necessarily if they should be going back to school, but how to do it safely. I would draw a parallel to how we reopened. There are ways of reopening safely, and some states have shown that it can be done, and there are ways of reopening not so safely. And it's the same thing with schools. There are certain parts of the country where I think in-person education could very much happen. Think about New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Connecticut. On the other hand, I cannot imagine schools reopening in person in Florida, Texas, or Arizona. Or perhaps they could reopen, but they would shut down very quickly because there's so much viral spread in the community that you would have students and staff getting sick pretty quickly.
Dr. Wyszynska, I'm struck by this sort of certainty. You're saying that we know how to prevent the spread of the virus, and yet when I look into how the virus is spread, there still seems to be a lot of uncertainty, whether it is airborne or not, and the WHO's conflicting guidance there, the question of whether non-symptomatic individuals transmit the virus. Where are we on some of those basic ideas when it comes to the science?
Yeah. We definitely do know that asymptomatic transmission is really critical. And this is really what makes this virus so deadly, because people are making decisions that really don't account for the fact that they might be spreading the virus. And yes, I do agree that there is disagreement at this point as to whether it is airborne. But if we were to pursue, we do know that being indoors really increases the risk. Poor circulation does matter. We know that social distancing, physical distancing does matter as well, that it works. We do know that masks are also very helpful if you cannot properly distance from other people. And again, because it's so much of the spread is asymptomatic, or pre-symptomatic, meaning before people have symptoms, these kinds of measures really can have a tremendous impact.
Professor, one thing I find fascinating here is one day this will be over. Do you think there'll be a permanence to our change of health policy, or do we just go back to what we were doing before?
So I would say that I don't know that this will be over. I think there's going to always be a new normal. I do think that this might become an endemic condition, disease. We might end up having to live with it, obviously not at the level that we live with it now. But it is possible that it might be something that we might need to get vaccinated for every year. The vaccine might not be 100% effective. We might not have a vaccine like what we have with measles, with very strong protective effect. So I think our old normal, which is, I think, what was the mistake in reopening and how people thought about what it would look like, we might never have the old normal again, even if we have vaccine and people are broadly vaccinated.
Does our health policy become more European-like?
That's hard to say, but I will say that with the level of unemployment that we're seeing, I think there are going to be questions asked about the employer-based insurance system. Where this will go, it's hard to say. But there are going to be changes also, I think, in how we might pay, even within our existing system, how we might pay. Fee-for-service has not worked particularly well during this pandemic because visits have really dropped. Elective surgeries have dropped. The providers that have been part of these newer models, ACO, type models have done significantly better and have been in much better position to withstand this shock. So we're hopeful that this will also be a change that will happen.
Marta Fozinska, thank you so much. With Duke Margolis, greatly appreciated this morning on health policy as we come out of this pandemic, or I should say, as we try to come out of this pandemic as well. We've got much more coming up here. Lots of good market action today, of course, with PepsiCo with the organic revenue growth. And Lisa, Tesla has been mentioned by a number of our guests this morning, including Guy Johnson early in the morning, dazzled by the performance of Tesla.
Yeah, shares up 6.5% ahead of the open, following the 11% gain on Friday. Just to give you some perspective, not including today's gain, Tom, Tesla shares are up 269% year to date. And there's a question, is there a bubble in stocks? When people ask that question, they say most of them not at all. They're actually pricing in some pessimism. But big tech and then Tesla is looking a little bubblicious. And yet you look at these shorts, the short interest, it's also looking bubblicious, which is a technical support for these shares, Tom. But wow, these shares on a tear right now.
Yeah, we will see. Let me do a data check right now, folks. I'm going to look across equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, except on Monday. And really what's important here is the VIX hasn't moved. There's been a lot of correlative features, but the VIX sticks out at 27.61, really pretty much unchanged. With that, futures up 21, make it 22. They were a little bit higher an hour ago. Dow futures up 196, and yields correlate. They did not earlier. Yields were lower, and now yields show a little bit of that risk-on feel. Please stay with us through the day. Worldwide, this is Bloomberg.
The following is a...
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast, Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
This is Mike Golick from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Trey Wingo, my son, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA?
On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1979, California's Nolan Ryan and Boston's Steve Renko each lose no-hitters in the ninth.
8 strikeouts for Ryan. And has his sign. He sets. The pitch to Dent is just low on the outside part of the plate. And the count 1-0.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Bloomberg brings you the latest financial and business news anywhere. We've actually given the matter quite a bit of thought.
Let's get now to our guest joining us from Bangkok. She joins us on the phone from the Hudson Valley.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
What does that moral leadership look like to you?
Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be.
The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days.
It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. COVID-19 cases continue to surge in certain key states across the nation. Investors are weighing the economic costs versus the healthcare risks as states reopenings stop and start. Of course, second quarter earnings kick off this week, led by the big money center banks. We'll have it all for you throughout the week. Looking at futures right here, equity futures pointing higher. Treasury rates are steady with the 10-year at that 0.65 level. The dollar is modestly weaker, while WTI crude holds steady in that $40 per barrel level. To dig deeper on those pre-market equity trading trends, we turn to Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this morning?
So much to look at, and we're not even really into earnings season yet, which is telling you something. But what jumps out is the juggernaut that is Tesla. The shares are up 6.5% in early trading. The electric car maker higher after surging in the past 2 weeks by 61%. Tesla's rally enabled CEO Elon Musk to surpass Berkshire Hathaway's Warren Buffett in the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. So, yeah, more of the same for Tesla, or so it would seem. Pfizer's up about 3%. The drug maker and Germany's BioNTech were granted an accelerated review of 2 COVID-19 vaccine candidates by U.S. regulators. The so-called fast-track designation was based on preliminary study results. BioNTech trades in the U.S. in the form of American depository receipts, and those ADRs are up almost 10%. And in sort of a related story, PerkinElmer up 2.5%. The lab equipment maker said second quarter revenue rose by an estimated 12%. PerkinElmer cited rising demand from COVID-19 testing labs. And then we got to talk deals. Maxim Integrated Products up 15.5%. The chip maker accepted a takeover offer from Analog Devices. The all-stock deal valued at $21 billion. The combined company will be a larger rival for Texas Instruments in providing chips for everyday devices. Then you have a couple of deals involving special purpose acquisition companies, or SPACs, or blank check companies, and they're the two most active stocks in early trading. They're Churchill Capital 3. Up 19%. Now, the healthcare cost management company Multiplan is combining with this SPAC. The deal's valued at $11 billion. Multiplan is owned by private equity firm Hellman & Friedman, which will remain the largest shareholder in the combined company. Then there's Spartan Energy acquisition up 16%. Electric car developer Fisker is going public by merging with the SPAC, by the way, the ticker SPAQ on this one, in a deal valued at $2.9 billion. Spartan Energy shares jumped last week by 45% on reports about this deal. We turn to Netflix, up 3.5%. BMO Capital Markets raised its 12-month share price estimate for the video subscription service by 25% to $625. The new target is second highest in the Bloomberg survey. The highest was actually set Friday by Goldman Sachs, $670. And just to put those numbers in perspective, you've got Netflix trading at the moment at $567.50. PepsiCo's up 2.5%. The soft drink and snack maker's second quarter earnings beat analysts' average estimate in the Bloomberg survey. Sales also surpassed projections as Americans stocked up on comfort foods. They're also stocking up on Herbalife's nutritional supplements as it happens. Herbalife Nutrition shares up 5%. Second quarter sales volume points up 12.4%, the fastest growth ever. And Herbalife also offered to buy back as much as $750 million of stock. And I got one more for you, Paul. Carnival up 2.5%. Stifel said the coronavirus pandemic may be, quote, a net long-term positive, end quote, for the cruise line owner. The firm said Carnival will emerge as a leaner and more efficient company.
Boy, that's looking well ahead. But, Dave, when I hear you reporting on SPACs and analysts tripping over themselves, raising price targets, it gets a lot of folks a little nervous about where we are in this market here.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, what really jumps out is with these blank check deals. When you've got Bill Ackman over at Pershing Square Capital going into the SPAC area, basically, selling shares on a bet that some big name executive will be able to find a deal. That's really what this is about. And so it's playing out today with these two SPACs. I mean, we've seen other deals like this over time. It's a way to go public without even having to bother with an initial public offering and all the time and expense that goes into it. It's proven to be a more popular route, no question.
I guess Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Tom, I know this is right on your radar. I'm seeing across the Bloomberg right now. Washington Redskins announced they are retiring the Redskins name.
And then they'll be the Cleveland Indians, widely presumed as well. It's time marches on.
Time marches on.
It's been hugely debated for decades. There's no question.
And then the Atlanta Braves come out with a statement saying they're not changing their name.
I did not see that.
But they will look into the tomahawk chop.
Okay. What are they going to do with the Red Sox? That's when I get concerned.
We will see. Pitching.
The headlines there, and of course, I heard Ritika Gupta say earlier this morning over trademark issues, they're not talking about what the name will be down the road. Rich Truman, do we know what the name will be down the road? Do you have any idea, Rich Truman, his keeper? He does not know. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. Brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Are you applying for PPP loan forgiveness? Don't leave money on the table or fail an SBA review. Visit CohnResnick.com/loan forgiveness. Paul?
Yeah, Tom, you know what we've certainly noticed during the Trump administration is just obviously a real move towards a deregulation in no areas that more prevalent than in the financial services business, and a lot of rules coming down, kind of giving the SEC perhaps a little bit less oversight. There's another one here, Tom. The SEC rule proposal would slash the number of investment managers that need to report quarterly holdings, and that's got some concern rising in the world of oversight. We welcome Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and a Bloomberg LP board member. Arthur, here's just another rulemaking that I think we've discussed with you time and time again over the last 3+ years, where the SEC's oversight is getting watered down. Is this one an issue?
I think it is an issue, and it continues to be part of the deregulatory mantra of the current administration. It clearly decreases transparency and reduces both the commissions and the public's access to information about our markets. And I think there's some question as to whether the agency has the authority to do this. Specifically, Section 13F1 withholds authority from the Commission to raise the threshold. And this proposal, I believe, fails to address that conflict. That's pretty serious stuff. And this is all part and parcel of the deregulatory bent of the current administration.
So, Arthur, I mean, I'm just looking at this and going into the details here. This would end disclosures for nearly 90% of current filers, including a lot of the hedge funds and mutual fund firms. I just, in a world of disclosure, increased disclosure, this just seems to fly in the face of it. Is this reporting issue such a constraint and such a cost or a burden for a lot of these asset managers?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that the proposal would mean that investment managers with less than $3.5 billion, including securities bought with leverage, no longer need to reveal the details of their portfolios. And just think of that. That's an enormous reduction in reporting. And what that really means is that the public is having withheld from them vital information in terms of their shareholdings.
Well, this Arthur goes, and folks, this is, of course, with great respect to the history of Arthur Levitt on Wall Street and respecting the individual investor. How are we going to disclose private equity holdings to individual investors who aren't fancy investors? They're going to have their 401k, and there's a primal scream on the street to put X% of it into private equity. Arthur, how does that get disclosed?
That's a whole new area, Tom. I think that that's a problem. How do you disclose those holdings? Because just to say you have X% in
doesn't do it.
The Carlyle Fund doesn't disclose what that X% means. How many different deals you're involved with.
I mean, Carlyle, of course, with their Washington heritage, Arthur, that means that they'll have a minority interest in the Washington, whatever they are, in the National Football League down the road, and you won't have a disclosure of that.
That's correct.
Arthur, are these things, all right, let's say a new administration comes in several months. Are these things that can be reversed, or are these kind of, once they're decided, they're decided?
It takes a long time to reverse basic policy decisions, but yes, they can be. And of course, there always is a chance of congressional action, but you never know where that's going to end up. I think this kind of stuff waxes and wanes with administrations. We're now in a deregulatory maelstrom. Undoubtedly, if the Democrats come back in, we probably will see some of these regulations reimposed. So my answer to your question is certainly affirmative.
Arthur Levitt, thank you so much. The former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and Bloomberg LP board member. Futures up 22 with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. The Florida Department of Health has reported almost 15,300 new COVID-19 cases, the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the coronavirus pandemic began. Republican Miami Mayor Francis Suarez explained the possibility of implementing stay-at-home orders again for his city.
Well, it's something we're going to have to consider. You know, I've never taken that off the table. I know the mayor of Atlanta also issued something similar. You know, we're looking at it every single day. We understand that, you know, there may not be federal help this time, which is something that's a concern. And, you know, we want to make sure that whatever we do it consistently because we want to make sure that people, you know, abide by it.
Japan and the U.S. are sharing infection information after about 62 cases at 3 U.S. military bases from July 7th to Sunday. Okinawa's governor says it provoked anger there. Governor Denny Tamaki says, I can't help but to have strong doubts about the U.S. military's measures to prevent infections. Officials say a fire on board a ship at Naval Base San Diego could burn for days. 21 people suffered minor injuries after the explosion and fire on the USS Bonhomme Richard. The cause of the fire is under investigation. Rear Admiral Philip Sobek.
An 1,800-foot perimeter has been established around the USS Bonhomme Richard and the surrounding buildings on the base and been evacuated to ensure safety of personnel.
Washington won't be the Redskins after mounting public pressure, including from its biggest sponsors. The NFL team announced this morning they will drop the name. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. We appreciate that. We await news on what the new Washington football name will be. We'll bring that to you once it is announced. Right now, looking at futures, green on the screen to start this earnings week. We have the S&P up about 0.7%, 23 points, 3201, back above that 3,200 level. Dow Jones Industrial up about 0.8% in the futures market. That's up called 205 points, 26,181 on the Dow Jones Industrials. Green on the screen. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
Millions of people in the UK struggle to put food on the table. That's why Asda's donated £23 million to FareShare and the Trussell Trust since 2018. Please help us do more by donating to our Fight Hunger trolleys in store. Asda, we're all in this together. FareShare and the Trussell Trust are registered charities. See asda.com/fight hunger.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise as investors brace for earnings that'll offer a window into the health of the world's biggest economy amid a raging pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 23 points, Dow futures up 206, NASDAQ futures up 102. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury down 5/32, yield 0.66%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down about 0.5%, down 19 cents at $40.35 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.80 at $18.14.80 an ounce. The euro, 1.1333 against the dollar. British pound, 1.2614, and the yen, 107.24. Shares at PepsiCo up more than 2.5% this morning after the snack maker reported stronger than expected second quarter sales. And also watching Maxim Integrated Products up more than 14% after rival Analog Devices agreed to acquire the semiconductor firm. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thank you so much. Admit it, folks, in this horrific pandemic and all the effects on our life, there have been things you've stumbled into that have improved your life. Paul Sweeney, you know what one of them is for me? The famous IB function on the Bloomberg terminal. I never used it until the pandemic. Never used it at all. You know, the IB function at all. And one of them as well that we've stumbled into is wonderful discussions with the doctors and the experts at the Johns Hopkins University. Here this morning, Joshua Sharfstein.
And not at that point, and certainly not at this point. And there are a couple reasons why that may be the case. We're now seeing deaths trend upward, so it could be primarily a function of timing, that there were younger people infected in the South, but now they're starting to infect people who are at greater risk for death, like older adults. But it also could be that the treatment is getting better, which would be a good thing. Right. Certainly we have a couple drugs that may work well, and but, you know, even if they reduce mortality some, it's still a lot of people dying.
And what's so important to me and what I think our audience wants to know is away from death, there's a lot of injury